Щоб тримали волі, вольки наші. Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Хотите жить – бегите. Хотите жить – сдавайтесь в плен. Россия не получит новую территорию Украины. Россия присоединит себя к той катастрофе, которую она принесла на оккупированную территорию нашей страны. Оккупант заполняет могилами захваченную территорию Украины. И все больше могил на территории самой России. Ценой того, что один человек в России хочет продолжать эту войну, кто хочет войны больше, чем жизнь. Ваши жизни, граждане России.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 610 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And we have huge news tonight. The U.S. has found its backbone, and we are fighting back.
And of course, we are going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news in the Middle East, as well as the news in Ukraine. But due to a event that just happened right when the stream was going live, we will be covering the Middle East first, because America is launching airstrikes against Iranian-backed terrorist groups in Syria at this very moment. The Department of Defense has come out with an official statement saying that these people will pay for the actions that they've conducted against U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq, and at this very moment, that air operation by the U.S. Air Forces and the U.S. Navy Air Arm is currently underway. This is massive news, and of course showing that the United States is going to respond, not at its own time like we were hearing earlier today. It's responding right now. And of course, we'll be covering that news first tonight. So if y'all are here for the news of the war in Ukraine, due to the breaking news of the current situation inside the Middle East, we will be covering the Ukrainian news in another segment a little while later. So just make sure to stick around for that. We don't have a little intro card for that. So once we get done with the Middle East news, we will immediately hop into the Ukraine war news. But moving on into our first bit of the news of the night, and we don't even have a lot to go off of right now, rather than reports from the U.S. government in writing. Right now, the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy is carrying out airstrikes on Iranian proxies in Syria. This is a massive development considering that U.S. action has not been conducted in the region directly against any Iranian-backed groups or Iran itself, and this is a move in the direction of U.S. response to the attacks that the Iranians and the Iranian-backed terrorist groups have been conducting against the United States and against Israel as well. Of course, we do not have a lot of information to go off of. As y'all can see, this was literally put up live about 12 or 13 minutes ago, just about at this point. So we don't really have a lot to go on beyond the official statement itself. But right now...
And also, Enforcer, we do have a little extra piece of information about these strikes. It looks like it was exactly 2 facilities used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in eastern Syria. So still kind of vague, but that's a little bit more of the detail.
Interesting. And do we have that on our Twitter?
Yes, it just got reposted.
And here we go. This is from the Israel War Room, which also, we better follow them. Let me go over here real quick. Oh, we are already following them. Hey, nice. I like it. But according to the Israel War Room, the United States Air Force launches defensive airstrikes targeting 2 facilities used by the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in eastern Syria. Based off of this informational report right here, we are going to move this marker into the area around Deir ez-Zur, as this is most likely going to be a more accurate marking at this point. And also, it is very interesting here that 2 of these bases have been stricken and that they're currently inside of eastern Syria. Really quickly, I'm going to have to take you all through a map of Syrian, let me make sure to type this in right, Syrian Civil War map. And let me see if I can get us an up-to-date Civil War map. And this one is from Wikipedia. And so it's about as accurate as we're going to get, to be quite honest with you all, because not really a lot of people follow the Syrian Civil War any longer. But we can see that the Assad regime controls a large part of the central and southwestern parts of Syria. The areas in green to the north are controlled by the Turks. The area in orange, I believe, is controlled by the Kurds. And then the area in yellow is controlled by Syrian Democratic Forces, which are US-backed and US-supplied. From the information that we're getting, according to what we've heard, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' bases are somewhere inside of eastern Syria, meaning that the Syrian Democratic Forces may have let it slip or may not have seen that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has facilities inside the eastern part of Syria. Based off of this is also very important news to understand as well, because this means that right now, at this moment, Iranian forces inside of Syria are being attacked. We do not know how serious it is, and also another thing I'd like to say is that based off of my understanding, and let me make sure that we back this up with some information as well, is Iran Islamic Revolutionary Guard, because let me make sure I'm getting this correct. Let's see here. So according to what we can find, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, also called the Sepa or Pasdaran, is a multi-service branch of the Iranian Armed Forces. Oh, I thought this was a militia. This is actually an official extension of the Iranian Armed Forces.
So we struck Iran's military, like their actual military.
Yes, right now at this moment, we are conducting airstrikes directly onto the Iranian armed forces that have bases inside of Syria at this moment.
Well, that's a mighty bold move, if I do say so. I'd say we found a backbone and a half now.
Dude, we sat there for about a week at this point and said, we'll respond when we feel like it. And then when we respond, we immediately start blasting Iranian military bases inside of Syria. This is...
Although it's probably a good thing. Like, even though it seems pretty extreme to do, I think that's what's needed to have the best chance of making Iran back down.
Oh, no doubt about it. I think that this is certainly a good move, and one that is showing the Iranians that they better back down or else the repercussions are going to be incredibly serious, as we're now clearly striking not an Iranian-backed terrorist group, we are striking an extension of the Iranian armed forces. In fact, from what I was able to find, doing a quick little search to try and get more information about the Revolutionary Guard Corps, this is also the group that conducted the revolution in Iran in the first place that overthrew the Shah in 1979. Meaning that this is really very similar to, I guess this would be the best way to explain it, very similar to the Waffen-SS as far as Nazi Germany was concerned in the Second World War, the political military arm of the Iranian government and an official extension of it. We, of course, do not know how devastating the damage has been to these Iranian bases or how many casualties the Iranians have suffered at this point, But based off the reports right now, 2 Iranian bases have been struck inside of Syria, and the United States Air Force is currently working to wipe out these bases in their entirety, most likely. We're going to be backtracking beyond this breaking news. Hopefully we'll be able to get more information as time goes by, but I hope that y'all are hearing this here first, and make sure to spread the news around. This is just happening at this moment. This started happening about 20 minutes ago, according to official reports, and at this very moment, there are U.S. aircraft flying over Syria and Iraq conducting airstrikes against Iranian military facilities. Make sure to spread that news, because that just broke at this very moment, and we're probably going to be seeing that the U.S. Air Forces are going to be extending their attacks into other Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps bases throughout the rest of the Middle East as well. But moving on into news from earlier in the day, and specifically inside of Moscow, I'm going to have to share with y'all something that I think is going to clearly show where Hamas really lies, because we actually have a little bit of a divided viewer base from what I've seen. Some people support the Palestinians and say that because of that, it's slightly understandable what Hamas is doing. Of course, we support Israel entirely, so we don't really agree with that mindset, but I've seen some of y'all have it. And some people, of course, well, many people who watch this channel have a pro-Israel mindset. Now, beyond the actual conflict in between Hamas and Israel, and looking at this from a larger power play picture, at this point, Iran was really the only country backing Hamas and Hezbollah and supporting them directly. It was rumored that the Russians probably support them, will support Hamas and Hezbollah, but it wasn't really confirmed, at least until today, because we heard from TASS, T-A-S-S, some of y'all may know that as one of Russia's official news networks, has published a statement today saying that a Hamas delegation has just arrived in Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin. Now, I think it's quite clear what side of history these people are on. Even moving on from just the aspect of it being a Palestinian-Israeli conflict, this is now not a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This has entered the realm of being an anti-Western or pro-Western conflict. And who is going to win and who is going to prevail in a conflict like this? Obviously, all of us being from the Western world or supporting the Western world, we all know who we support. Otherwise, by supporting Hamas, now we're saying we support the Russians. So obviously, there is no way that one can support Hamas at this point, because now they're clearly aligning themselves with the Russians, and the Russians are clearly aligning themselves with Hamas. But according to the statement today, which was retweeted by Disclosed TV, according to TASS, Hamas delegation visits Moscow, Russia. That happened just around 12 hours ago in the morning. This is, of course, a very serious development. This is now moving this conflict in Israel from a mere ideological difference in between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and this is moving this into the international sphere of a pro-Russian Chinese axis or an allied sphere in the Western world. Obviously, I think that many of y'all are going to start seeing that support for Hamas is going to start dropping off quite rapidly. And I wonder, Matthew, how some people who have been out there kind of supporting Hamas, some people out there, Matthew, have a little bit more prominent voices than others. How are they going to justify being pro-Ukrainian and condemning the Russians, but then also supporting the Palestinians and Hamas, which are Russian-aligned? I wonder how that's going to work.
It just does not work. You can't support one and then support the other at the same time. You either have to be for democracy or you have to be against it. And if you support terrorism, how can you support Ukraine? Because Ukraine's fighting for their land.
And I would have to say that at this point, I would have to be quite honest with y'all, we are not going to really be able to look at this the way we have been and explain the history behind Israel and Palestine and who belongs on the land and who's where. That's been completely removed at this point. This is now about strategic interests of the Western world. We're now seeing a group that's aligned with the Russians. The Russians are clearly anti-American. The Iranians are clearly anti-American and anti-Western as a whole. And they are now openly supporting Hamas, having their delegations arrive in Moscow to speak with them. And they're currently going to probably start supporting them as well in their fight against Israel. That makes it evident and clear without a shadow of a doubt, to try and make it sound almost legal, that there is no way that Hamas can be supported by anyone in the Western world without being a pro-Russian. There's no way that it can be done now. This has moved on from the Middle East into an international scale now, and we can clearly see that at this moment. And so
Also, notice that Ukraine supports Israel as well. That's why they're wanting to come speak in Israel. They're wanting to work with them, so that way they can ensure both mutual benefits and also their defense as well. And you don't see Ukraine siding with the terrorists because Ukraine has experience with terrorists. They're fighting Russia for over years now, and they know which side's in the right because they're actually having firsthand experience because of that.
And I would agree completely with that. And also, I see some people saying, and this is something that we've actually covered a while ago, someone said people supporting Palestinian civilians aren't supporting Hamas, guys. And I mean, you kind of, sort of, but when you actually get beyond just the simple statement that everyone always likes to make of, oh, the dictatorship can do one thing, but the people do the other. In Russia, a lot of people have been saying about the Russian situation, just to draw a parallel here, that the Russian public doesn't support the war in Ukraine. But every single time independent polling is done, even by Radio Free Europe, which has been funded in the past by the CIA, clearly showing that they would probably have a tilt in the Western direction, even their independent polling in Russia found that nearly 70%, and now it's somewhere around 66% of the public inside of Russia support the war in Ukraine. And that's something that we've seen for a while. And also, on top of that, the last time that an election was held inside the Gaza Strip, the Fatah was in control, which was a terrorist group of its own that, of course, preyed upon the public for the most part. But an election was held, and according to the United Nations, which is generally accurate with its observant statements about elections, they said that the election in the Gaza Strip was fair and actually honestly run, which is kind of shocking for terrorist groups. But nevertheless, the Hamas group in 2006, when the last election was run inside the Gaza Strip, won the majority of the vote by a massive margin. It was nearly 2/3 or 3/4, and I've seen different numbers being reported nowadays, but it was the overwhelming majority of Gazan citizens who voted for Hamas. So it's very hard to divide the Gazans from Hamas because Hamas was elected by them. Of course, has never been re-elected since 2006. They've actually canceled all elections since then. But they were elected in at that time. They represent the people of Hamas, according to the last election. And so we largely have to go off the assumption that is the way the people of the Gaza Strip think. They want Hamas to be in charge, and they support what Hamas is doing, because that's what they voted for in 2006. And everyone back then knew what Hamas was. Hamas had already been a terrorist group at that point for nearly 10 to 15 years. And so everyone knew that, and then they voted them in. They knew that entirely. And Mark Gagne actually came back with an official number. It was 73% of the vote went to Hamas against the Fatah, which was the terrorist group in charge at the time, in 2006. And so there's no way to try and say that, oh, I support the Palestinians because the Palestinians voted these people in. So if you support the Palestinians, by extension, you support Hamas. There's really no way to divide the two really that well once you get into the weeds of who elected who and why they're there. But moving on from that little side note, just to kind of explain why you can't really make a clear divide in between the public inside of really Russia, even at this point, or inside of the Gaza Strip, because these people elected these folks. And way back in the day, well, actually in Russia, it's very questionable whether anyone's electing anyone up there. Of course, the elections are completely screwed. Everyone knows that. But one thing's clear is that even though the elections are completely screwed, according to public independent polling, a lot of people support what the Russian government's doing inside of Russia and inside of the war in Ukraine. But with that, we're going to be moving on into the area of Iran and the western borders of Iran near Iraq, because we heard a statement from the Iranian government today saying that they will be conducting large-scale military exercises and activities starting tomorrow. Right now, the dawn will be breaking, probably by the end of this stream, inside of Iran. And that means that will be the next day in that part of the world. And so we will probably be seeing that there is some kind of a massive military undertaking by Iran. We don't know if it's going to actually be a training exercise. We saw the Russians justify their invasion of Ukraine as a military exercise, and then it turned into a full-on war. And now knowing that the U.S. Air Force is conducting airstrikes against Syrian, against bases in Syria that the Iranians have, we probably have a feeling that this may be a guise for larger operations. And so With that, of course, very interesting escalations possibly occurring in Iran with their armed forces. And moving on into the news in the Middle East, largely in Syria and Iraq once more, we heard that more attacks have occurred on U.S. bases today. This, of course, was before the U.S. airstrikes just started happening just a half hour ago, which is still breaking news, and we're trying to get as much information on it as possible. But according to OSINT Defender, more explosions and sirens have been reported at U.S. bases near both the Al Omar oil fields and the Conoco gas fields in eastern Syria within the last hour, with reports that more drone and rocket attacks have occurred against the U.S. bases. Of course, we can't really say at this point that America must respond. Right now, while we're running the stream, America is responding at this very moment with airstrikes against Iranian camps inside of Syria. And so we will probably be seeing that these attacks today will be adding on to the shopping list that the U.S. Air Force has for targets that must be taken out and destroyed inside of the area of Syria and Iraq. Moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also heard that the trickling of U.S. troops into the region is continuing, as a battalion-sized force of around 900 soldiers have arrived in the area, and we believe, although it didn't say this officially according to the Spectator Index, these 900 soldiers are all a part of the Patriot batteries and the THAAD battery that is being sent into the Middle East and the surrounding countries, such as the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and Iraq, as well as Kuwait. We have a feeling that all of these soldiers are not going to be in one area. This isn't an infantry battalion or anything similar. This is most likely just an amalgamation of the Patriot batteries that are being spread out throughout the Middle East at the moment. But going off of that assumption and assuming that these are the Patriot batteries or SAM batteries, this means that American anti-air defenses in the region have just been massively bolstered, and we most likely have a large encompassing umbrella of air defense through most of the Middle East at this point. The PAC-2 and PAC-3 missiles that are used by the Patriot missile system in America's most modern iterations of the system have a range of approximately 110 miles, meaning that if a Patriot was set up around Abu Dhabi, it could reach out about that far. In every direction, of course, in a circle, or more so in a circumference, whatever you want to call it. Be a nerd if you want. But anyways, that is pretty decent air defense shield. And I'm trying to sit here and think, this is just one. And of course, we can't measure all of them out. But if we were, I believe that 14 Patriot batteries and a THAAD battery mixed in between them probably does have enough range in between them to have some overlapping areas in between them, where the entire area of the Persian Gulf and mostly Iraq and Kuwait probably have some kind of an air defense shield that's now been made by these Patriot systems, or will be made by these Patriot systems in the next few days, that will be able to protect further U.S. forces in the area from possible Iranian attacks. The arrival of the air defense, along with the small amount of forces that we currently have spread out throughout the Middle East, and also with large Air Force support, will most likely provide a cover for more U.S. forces to move into the area if need be, such as the Army and the Marine Corps. The kind of air defense that they'll be getting will be ensuring that these forces will be safe to arrive into the area en masse, and also begin to stage for possible further operations. And so what we're seeing right now is probably preliminary actions for larger armed forces movements into the region. Moving on from that, and on into the news inside of Israel itself, things have been heating up incredibly within the area of Israel, with the first reported raids by the Israeli Defense Forces happening on the Gaza Strip today. I have to make it quite clear, however, that this is not the official ground invasion yet. Even according to the Israeli Defense Forces, these were just preliminary raids that were conducted across the Gaza border today to see what kind of resistance they could possibly expect by Hamas fighters once the main ground offensive begins. It's very interesting to see this because usually offensives work with an element of surprise. It appears that the Israeli strategy in this offensive will be to actually feel out what is ahead of them and then move forward the bulk of their force. So largely armed reconnaissance is what they're doing right now within the area of the northern Gaza Strip. But before we even get into that, we have seen that at the same time that armed incursions are starting to begin within the Gaza Strip, we have heard that 100 armored vehicles of the Israeli Defense Forces have begun to enter the West Bank and have started to engage in actions in this area, according to a tweet that we were able to find today, if it loads. And we're waiting for it to load. So,
Peter, the Twitter's been going slow today. Man, it's having problems again. There we go.
There we go. And so, according to Inside NK Geopolitics, over 100 Israeli Defense Forces armored vehicles have reportedly entered the West Bank in what appears to be a large-scale raid for the arrest of Hamas fighters. Hamas, of course, isn't just within the Gaza Strip. They also do exist within the West Bank as well. And so, from what we understand, it appears that the Israeli Defense Forces are trying to cover all of the bases and try and find all of the Hamas leaders and fighters and end up taking them out or arresting them. This is a very good move, because the leaders of Hamas, funnily enough, and also some of the higher-up officers of Hamas, very few of them actually are inside of the Gaza Strip. Some of y'all might find this to be a big shocker. I actually found this to be quite a shocker as well. Hamas is a very cowardly organization as far as their leadership goes. And none of them like to be around where the actual fighting occurs, which is in the Gaza Strip or outside of it. So a lot of them have ended up inside of Turkey. Just let that sink in. Yeah, just go open the door and let the sink in. But let that sink in for a minute in seriousness. There are Hamas leaders, and from what we understand, although the Turks have asked them to leave, they haven't left yet, from what we understand, according to the information we've gotten. There are also Hamas leaders inside of countries like Iran, of course, because they largely go to Iran for training and further coordination with Iranian forces. And there's also Hamas leaders and fighters that are inside of the West Bank, which is considered a lot more safe than Gaza, because Gaza is of course, the basing point for all Hamas activities that are armed, and of course any Israeli response is immediately going to be striking the Gaza Strip first and then going into other areas. And so the Israeli Defense Forces that are moving into the West Bank aren't necessarily going into the West Bank to take the place over, or to, of course, bring it under Israeli control. They're more so going in looking specifically for Hamas fighters and leaders and trying to either take them out or arrest them while they start to work on the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, we've also been getting some very unfortunate reports that it seems as though the Iron Dome system today has been overrun, and it was not able to intercept the majority or all of the Hamas rockets that were fired over the past 24 hours. Video footage...
Also, real quick, Enforcer, before you move on from that last story you were talking about, you do know that we have a video on our Twitter page showing the actual incursion into Gaza by Israel from last night. It's under our likes tab, by the way.
We actually have that right here.
Well, what do you know?
Well, what do you know? The more you... But Matthew brings up a really good point. Because Peter, the Twitter's here. And we got to go to the Twitter real quick. So let me pull this up for y'all. Let me go to our profile. Because you can find our Twitter in the link in the description below. And you can go to this and you can find a lot of the news that we are running live on air on our Twitter before you even get to our stream. We post a lot of stuff that ends up on the news, especially in the Middle East, here on the Twitter, before we go live on air. This is kind of our process in the Middle East of gathering up news, because unlike the war in Ukraine, where there's just a load of video and picture evidence coming out, inside of the Middle East, the Israeli Defense Forces and the U.S. Armed Forces have a lot more operational security and a better lockdown on what soldiers are able to upload online, so we don't really get a lot of videos, except for from Israeli civilians of the Iron Dome system operating or something similar, so we largely have to go off of written reports on what has been happening in the Middle East. And so you can find most of that here on our Twitter. Link, of course, in the description below, and you can go and see all of the news as we start to compile it live. And also, I see a lot of people saying, I don't like Twitter. Hey, you know, I don't think anyone does at this point, but it's really the best place for us to put this stuff. So, you know, what do you know? What do we do? But anyways, moving on from that, go into the link in the description below. Go get on the Twitter. You're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing it for the Lee Spring Army, and you're also doing it to get a little bit more news for yourself. And so, moving on from that, and back into the Middle East news, unfortunately it does appear that the Iron Dome system was not able to successfully intercept all Hamas rockets, and we did see that a power plant outside of Tel Aviv was hit by a Hamas rocket today, and it appears to have significantly damaged the ability for that power plant to supply energy to the grid. From what we understand, it's the Gaza power plant right here in this area, and from what we can tell, it was stricken quite horrendously. And also, Matthew, we're not showing you right now because we're going to be getting to that here in a minute, but we can see the power plant getting hit by the rocket here in this clip. We can see an Iron Dome intercept one of the rockets, but unfortunately, not all of them. As one of them hit the power plant, and we can see the explosion of the electrical substation outside of it.
תרדו על הרצפה!
That's the end of the clip, but of course it does appear that some serious damage was caused at the power plant in the area today, hopefully not damaging the grid too severely, as that may start to impede the Israeli war effort, and also may start to cause suffering for the civilian population inside of Israel. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also saw that a family was able to enter a bomb shelter inside of their house, luckily seconds before a Hamas rocket would hit their house directly and explode, practically leveling the building right above them. We see the family going into the basement, of course, carrying their kids with them.
This is like security footage from inside of a house?
From what I understand, it is.
And who's controlling the camera?
I don't really know. But we can see the Hamas rocket hit, destroying the house right above them, right after they went into the shelter. Very lucky that they were able to get in there in time. And once again, just a real quick notice, because a lot of people are always going, oh, you know, look at what Israel is doing to Hamas. Of course, forgetting the fact that the whole reason this is going on right now is because Hamas crossed the border and killed 2,400 Israeli civilians from the last count I was able to find. And look at who they're attacking. They're not going out of their way to precisely strike the Israeli Defense Forces or the Israeli government. No, their rockets land in neighborhoods where people have their kids around and are having to quickly crawl down into a bomb shelter so that way they don't end up being splattered along with their kids all across the garden in the backyard. Keep that in mind whenever anyone talks about the situation going on in Israel, because the reason why this conflict is going on right now, it's not because of Israel, and it's not because of really anything that they were doing, at least within the past few months. This is because of Hamas and their merciless executions of civilians, or the attempted executions of civilians like we're seeing right here. And so, with that, we're going to be moving on from this bit. And also, I saw someone say, Israel flattened civilian homes, but this is bad. Well, do you really think Israel has an option when Hamas is always putting their weapons and equipment either inside of civilian buildings or right outside of them, so that way when the Israelis try to strike them, they can always blame themselves as the victim? Israel isn't hiding bombs in this family's home for it to be a target. They're not doing anything like that where it can even plausibly be a target. This is just a house filled with a family, and they're going out of their way to target this thing deliberately. Really, honestly, the rocket's so unguided, it's not even being targeted deliberately. They just know that rocket is going to fly off into the distance, and hopefully it's going to land on some Israeli family and end up killing them. That's really the whole entire mindset behind Hamas, and we can see that clearly in this clip, because these people were the lucky ones to survive it, but also the unfortunate recipients of the rocket attack as well. But moving on from that, and further on down and towards the area of Ashdod, we also got to see a Hamas rocket fall into a building and then fail to explode. It appears to have been a dud, which was very lucky for this family, whoever was in this building, but here's the clip. There's the Hamas rocket, and it just goes flying into a house. We see dust and debris getting flung up, and it didn't explode, luckily enough. See him coming downstairs. When you see the room filled with smoke where the rocket is, he closes the door and then moves on. But still, very interesting to see that many Hamas rockets, around 3 of them from our count, were able to make it through the Iron Dome today and ended up hitting several buildings. And also a power plant as well, which was probably the most important casualty of the rockets that were able to hit their targets today. Moving on from that, we did see that the conflict inside the Gaza Strip is beginning to occur at a much faster and more accelerated pace than we've seen. It appears that the Israeli Air Force is now not the only force of the Israeli army that's getting involved, or the Israeli military. We now see that the Israeli Defense Forces are conducting ground incursions into the Gaza Strip, which we saw on clip here today. And so, here it is. When you see the lead vehicles are Merkava 4, I believe they're Merkava Mark 4 Ms. We can then see some armored personnel carriers moving in, along with some bulldozers, which are clearing paths for the vehicles. We can then see the column continuing to advance at a slow pace. When you see the bulldozers are the lead vehicles, followed by some Merkavas, and then further back in the column, a few APCs. We can now see the Merkavas firing towards the Hamas positions in the distance, as the bulldozers continue to try and clear paths, most likely for the offensive that will be coming here soon. We can see a drone filming the tank's strikes on Hamas targets. And we can also see some kind of debris raining down from the sky. We can now see the armored personnel carriers beginning to roll forward. We can see the column moving around one of the border fences, and we can also see that the bulldozers are clearly starting to tear down the fence and create assault lanes for these armored columns that will be in the offensive to move forward in the future. And this does appear to not
I like how they just literally pull in like Caterpillar, like massive D9 dozers and start just plowing the wall down.
It's weird to think that that's actually a common vehicle in the Israeli military. It's just a Caterpillar tractor. That's just kind of a little bizarre, honestly.
That's a massive bulldozer too. That's like I think one of the biggest ones they make.
You know what? I think it's a D9, isn't it? Caterpillar.
Yes, it's a huge one.
D9. And let's see if I can go pull up the armored bulldozer. Isn't that the one that guy used, Matthew? You know, the killdozer?
I'm not really sure, but I think it was a big one like that.
So here we go. Here is a armored Israeli D9 Caterpillar. And
Damn.
These are fairly common, actually. Funnily enough, I think they have around at least 150 of these things from my last count that I remember. Pretty high number. They do lose these things somewhat frequently, though, because while it's well armored, it's still a tractor. So, you know, you can only armor the thing up so much before you can't. But still, these are the vehicles that were at the lead of the column. And from what we can tell, these are most likely engineering units or battlefield engineer units that are starting to clear the way for the Israeli offensive that will come. Of course, it would be a lot more difficult for the Israeli offensive to roll forward and then have to wait for the Caterpillars to clear the way for the assault lanes, or more so the assault paths for these armored units. So it appears that these smaller units, like the one we just saw last night, are not only trying to seek out the Hamas forces and get an idea of their force strength along the border, they're also trying to clear the way for the offensive that will be coming after they gather that information and clear the way. And so very nice to see that this ground incursion happened and appears to have been wildly successful for what the Israeli Defense Forces were planning to achieve. And meanwhile at sea, and I don't think you've seen this one, Matthew, the Israeli Navy engaged and fought the Hamas Navy at sea today, and it was caught on film.
The Hamas Navy. I'd like to see that.
Well, it's just like jet skis and like small boats, but it's still technically their navy. What we're seeing right here is an Israeli Navy patrol boat, and to the left side of the screen, when the camera pans over, you'll see the Hamas boat being fired upon.
התקפות בלייב. התקפות בלייב, קבלו.
When you see the tracers flying over, we can see the Hamas boat right there.
Why?
And when you see that Israeli boat is treading water, I mean, look at that thing go.
אחי, זה נראה לי מחבלים, באמא שלי.
And when you see the Hamas boat still trudging forward, closing the distance in between the two, which is certainly not smart for this little rib, because this little rib is about to get ribbed by the giant Israeli patrol boat that it's going up against. Also, another thing that I want to note really quickly is just notice the raw speed and the wake of this patrol boat. This thing's gotta be going at least 40 knots with that kind of wake. It is like a speedboat nearly. And that actually begs the question, what kind of patrol boats does the Israeli Navy have? So let me pull up Israeli Navy equipment. And one of the main search results, Matthew, was Israeli aircraft carrier. It's like, I don't think so. But let's see here. So let me go over here and let me go to the other one, list of ships of the Israeli Navy. So we have the Sar class 6 corvettes, which are actually pretty nice looking. That actually kind of looks a little Dutch. Let's see here. So they're actually loosely based on the German Braunschweig class corvettes. Well, actually, they look a lot like it. They almost look identical. But anyways, moving on from that, that's not the one we're looking for. Missile boats, maybe? Nope, it's not a... Well, maybe it was a missile boat. It may have been a Sa'ar 4.5 class missile boat. It may also be the Aliyah subclass missile boat, too. But let's see if they have any other smaller ships as well. Okay, so these obviously were not used by Israel right now because all of these have been retired. So this is apparently the roster for the entire Israeli Navy at the moment. So going off of what we saw, it's mostly some kind of a SAR 3 class missile boat. One of the SAR classes is what we just saw engaging the Hamas Navy. Going and seeing the footage, I'm assuming that it had to have been one of these SAR 3 class boats. The wake is very similar for the speed that we believe it was traveling at. You can see right there. And if we get it on the big screen, we can see a mast, and we can also see. It's very hard to tell actually. There's not a lot of pixels there. But if I had to try and make an assumption, it looks a lot like a SAR 3 class missile boat. So that was what was engaging the Hamas rib, and it does appear that it was doing a pretty decent job, although we didn't get to see how the battle concluded. Nevertheless, who would have ever thought that you would see the Hamas Navy, technically, getting attacked by the Israeli Navy? I never thought that we would see a naval battle in between a terrorist force and the Israeli Navy, but here we are, and it actually did happen today. Moving on from that and into the Gaza Strip itself, we also saw some pictures from just a few hours ago as the nighttime was beginning to wane and morning was starting to break in the area of a massive amount of helicopter fire and flares being fired off in northern Gaza, which may be another part of an Israeli incursion. And here's the clip. We can hear the helicopters. We can see something landing from the sky. It appears to be flares. And some people are probably about to say, oh, it's incendiary. No, it's not. We've seen white phosphorus and other kinds of incendiaries enough to know this is obviously not anything like that. Okay, I know what these are. These are star shells meant to illuminate the area so that way they can actually see like it's daylight on the ground. So that's what these are.
That's pretty cool. I've never heard of that. So they linger up there for how long?
I think a pretty good while because these things have a parachute attached to them. And so they just burn with the parachute attached and they produce enough light that they can simulate daylight on the ground, at least for a little while. I think they last for maybe like 3 minutes or so until another one has to be fired into the area. But that appears to be what the Israelis are doing with these, is that they fired them off so that way their ground forces wouldn't have to use thermals or night vision and they could just look across the area like it was broad daylight. Not a lot of people talk about these things, but I honestly think they're quite neat. And you can see how long it takes for these things to actually reach the ground. So, of course, they last a long time. And these things burn even after they hit the ground for a little bit. And we hear what almost sounds like a lawnmower, but funnily enough, it's an Israeli helicopter, most likely a Cobra, circling out there in the distance, probably trying to find a target. That may also be what the star shells are for, is to illuminate the ground for the Cobras, because I believe that some Israeli Cobras may not have the most up-to-date or the most advanced versions of night vision. So that may be why they're using the star shells. Although I'm still kind of doubtful about that because considering the Israeli military budget for their national size, I would assume that all of their Cobras have been updated with more modern and more advanced night vision devices, or maybe even infrared on some of the later iterations of the Cobra that they have. But moving on from that clip and showing further occurrences or armed occurrences inside the area of the northern Gaza Strip, we also saw multiple clips today, once again, of the Israeli Air Force continuing its strikes against Hamas targets inside of the Gaza Strip. We saw here that a Hamas commander had been wiped out today. Apparently, his name was Shadi Baruch, and I gotta say that his command was a little shoddy, and it looks like it was a little Baruch. I'm trying to make that work, but here's the clip of his command base being knocked out today and also him being knocked out as well. And there it goes.
Damn. They knocked out the command base and a few extra buildings just for good measure.
Man, they were just making sure to get the whole zip code, apparently, to take this guy out. But that commander is now gone, been confirmed. He was wiped out in this airstrike. And that is great to know, as that's once again going to be limiting the amount of intel that the deputy head of the intel in Hamas will be able to receive. Because, of course, he was doing a little bit of a shoddy job. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see continued Israeli Air Force strikes on the Strip in this clip right here. Also, by the way, really quickly, just a note, You see someone wandering around right there, and we can see several vehicles pulled up alongside this compound. And so the Israelis, although they didn't show this in this clip, may have actually been able to gather enough information that we are able to confirm that this is a Hamas compound. But once again, because we didn't get to see the video, we have to say it's an alleged Hamas compound. But we did see it get hit by an Israeli 2,000-pound glide bomb. And we can see more compounds being hit as well in these clips. We can see multiple.
The Israelis just really don't know about choosing different bomb sizes. Every single time it's that massive bomb. Like, they have consistently used it. I'm not sure if they even have smaller bombs in their inventory.
Dude, you know the U.S. arms manufacturers must be drooling whenever they see anyone from the Israeli Defense Forces come in to, you know, say Lockheed Martin. Because they said, they go, "Hi, what will you be having today?" And the Israeli says, "I'll have 5,000 2,000-pound bombs. Would you like any 500-pound bombs?" "No, just 2,000-pounders." "Okay, all right, we'll put down that order. Thank you so much." You know, because, man, Lockheed Martin must be like, these people are the best. Because they buy, I think, the biggest bombs we still produce these days on a large scale.
They said, "What's the biggest one you have?" And they said, "I want a 2,000-pounder." And they said, "Oh, okay, will do. They're big spenders."
I mean, good lord. It's insane to watch this stuff. It's like they're dropping small Moabs, and it really is a small Moab with this kind of ammunition.
I guess when you have a budget like they do, you can afford it.
I mean, hell, these explosions are so big, they're glitching out cameras. That's wild. That's the
I
end
don't
of
know
that
what that
clip.
feels like, just to be in the vicinity of that. Like, I know people are gonna say, "Well, obviously it's a shockwave," but I'm like, seriously, like the feeling I'd imagine of being anywhere in the vicinity of that thing going off, obviously not in the blast radius, but outside of the blast radius, is probably a tremendous, like, an experience you'll never forget.
It's probably truly one of the most insane feelings you can ever experience from just a bomb of that size. And I'm trying to find here some pictures of the Israelis with bombs mounted to their aircraft, just to see if it is the norm whenever they go out on a sortie to just carry 2,000-pound bombs. And I can't really find any good pictures of any Israeli jets carrying bombs, funnily enough, just off of a quick look. You know what? I'll just pull up the 2,000-pound bomb instead. U.S. 2,000-pound bomb. Let me go grab that. And let me go grab the actual pictures here. So, these are the 2,000-pound bombs. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact designation for them, but here are some people standing around them for scale, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a running idea of how big these bombs really are. They're huge. Probably some of the biggest out there that are conventionally used. Of course, a lot of people say, what about the 5,000-pounders or the 4,000-pounders? They're out there, but they're kind of made to order, and they're not really as commonly used. And your conventional bomb sizes in the modern day are 250, well, for the Western world, are 250-pounders, 500-pounders, 1,000-pounders, and 2,000-pounders. Anything beyond that, they start to get a little bit more rare, and they're not really used that much because they're slightly impractical. And they also limit the amount of strikes that a single aircraft can conduct. Even 2,000-pounders are starting to really push the limits on how effective an aircraft can be and how many targets it can strike. Because an F-16, I think, can only carry about 8 of these things, maybe 9 of them if it's really trying to push it, just because there's not enough mounting areas for more than about 8 or 9 of them. And so going off of that, this F-16 only has about 8 or 9 strikes that it can effectively conduct with these 2,000-pound bombs. With 500-pounders, you can mount, I believe, close to around 24 500-pounders on an F-16, which is the primary aircraft that is the workhorse of the Israeli Air Force. And that gives you, with, of course, all of them being guided, about 24 strikes that you can conduct, of course, with smaller yields. But still, a huge bomb, and it seems as though that is just the preferred bomb of choice. And I just got rid of the map. That was not supposed to happen. But that's the preferred bomb of choice for the Israeli armed forces. And really quickly, let me go pull up that map again so that way we can carry on with our news. For some reason, I thought it was a Twitter or a Reddit thing, so I closed it immediately. But let me go here. And here we go. So we got it back. So let me grab it, drag it over here. And so we're now going to be returning back into the news of what's been happening inside the Gaza Strip, where we saw continued Israeli Air Force airstrikes somewhere in the middle of the central Gaza Strip. Well, you see what is apparently a Hamas vehicle, was a Hamas vehicle on the move, and it appears to have just been disintegrated. I don't know what that was, but it's like a freaking neutron bomb. Look at this thing.
Jeez.
What the hell is that?
It like expanded and then like went back in.
That was nuts. We can see another Hamas vehicle on the move being stricken by the Israeli Air Force.
Gotta admit, the Israelis kind of have a more spectacular way going about hitting vehicles than the Ukrainians.
Dude, the Ukrainians are like, let's get this $50 drone bomb. Like, the Israelis are like, F it. Get the $75,000, 2,000 pound bomb. They cost way more than that, by the way. But they're like, let's just hit it with the heaviest thing we got.
It's like the Israelis are like what the Ukrainians would be if they didn't have a budget they were working with, like just unlimited amounts of money. They just go and get the biggest bombs. Like even for the trucks here and the people, they're like expending these massive bombs even on just like not civilians, but the soldiers.
that was
like a George Bush mess up.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
You know, the hideous war in Iraq, Ukraine, excuse me.
But anyways, moving on from these clips, great to see that the Israeli Air Force was able to hit Hamas militants outright today. And moving on from Gaza and into the northern part of Israel and the southern border of Lebanon, we did get to see that the Israeli Air Force has been conducting small-scale attacks against Hezbollah today as well. And here's the clip. We see the Hezbollah site right there being stricken. Another ATGM post, of course, gone and forgotten immediately. But moving on from that little clip, great to see some light activities by the Israeli Air Force against the Hezbollah inside of southern Lebanon. And moving all the way down into the middle of the Israeli desert. This is actually something very interesting I want to share with you all, because I actually didn't know the natural beauty that is inside of the desert in southern Israel. This is the Negev Desert. And let me type that in real quick. The Negev Desert. So this is the Negev right here, and it's just the desert that encompasses all of southern Israel, and also encompasses a decent bit of the Sinai Peninsula as well. Looking at this, though, it is absolutely gorgeous for a desert environment. Of course, it has old Roman outposts in it, and outposts from times long since gone. We can also see a couple of these antelope-looking animals. I have no idea what their actual name is, so don't even ask me. But looking over the landscape, and I gotta say, Matthew, this looks a lot like the area around the Grand Canyon.
It kind of does. Like, it looks very similar to it. This is just slightly different, but pretty close. I like the... Wait a minute, go back up on the pictures for a second.
This one?
I'll put another one.
This one?
Yeah, look at that tree out there. It's like something I've seen from somewhere. I can't remember where. Like maybe the Lion King or something. That lone tree out in the desert like that.
I would, it kind of does look like that, I gotta say. But, pretty cool stuff. I mean, it looks beautiful out there. And if we look down here, that's, I believe these are actually salt marshes. We might actually be able to geolocate that, but we won't. We won't for time reasons. But still, very beautiful place. But also, it's not just a beautiful place. This is also the sandbox for the Israeli Defense Forces, literally, as they've been using it to train Israeli forces on the urban combat that will be seen inside of the Gaza Strip. According to information that was published today by Clash Report, which was also restated from the Wall Street Journal, the Israeli military has built a replica of a generic Palestinian village nicknamed Little Gaza at a base in the Negev Desert, where soldiers train for combat against armed forces in narrow streets and a labyrinth of tunnels. The city, built by the Israeli Defense Forces, contains both low-rise buildings, some of which were painted with graffiti depicting the late Yasser Arafat, and 8-story buildings, as well as replicas of mosques and other buildings standard for the Gaza Strip. In total, there are around 600 structures inside of Little Gaza. So it appears that the Israelis are well prepared, at least training-wise, to get Israeli forces prepared for the urban fighting that will become synonymous with the upcoming invasion. This is probably the most elaborate-sounding training field that I've ever heard of outside of the United States. For 600 structures to be in this training compound, that is truly impressive and shows that the Israelis put a large amount of effort into the training for their armed forces, although it's an entirely conscript armed force. Moving on from that, And moving on out of Israel, that is largely all of the news that we were able to get today from the Middle East. Of course, still, around an hour ago, U.S. airstrikes started to occur against Iranian forces inside of Syria, and we will be waiting to see if we get any further details or information as the stream continues on. But so many of y'all have thrown in comments on the Middle East, and a lot of y'all have had some very interesting comments, and others of y'all have had some some pretty interesting takes, and I would find it worthwhile to discuss. And so what do you got, Matthew?
All right, so it is now time to go over what the critters have been saying during this entire time. And please forgive me if I stutter tonight because I am exceptionally tired. I don't know why. It's probably just me being me. But anyways, moving on to our first poll question. It says the U.S. has begun striking Iranian proxies in Syria, and will this lead to a major escalation? 51% said yes, it will escalate things. 24% said, we must wait and see. 17% said no, it will go unanswered by Iran, and 8% said unsure. And I would almost bet that it's going to be the 51% that said yes, it will escalate things. To me, it seems like Iran is looking for a fight because they're the ones attacking our bases with no reason, really. And they're trying to jump right in the middle of this fight between Gaza and Israel. And we know that they fund Hezbollah, which is also going to get involved very heavily, probably very soon. And to me, I don't see it backing down. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that this is certainly an escalatory action, but it's one I believe was necessary given the circumstances. I've heard people, and this is something I've heard. Now it's from both sides. Both sides of the aisle, as people call it these days. But I've heard some people on one side say, and it's the majority of people from one side say, we shouldn't be involved in Ukraine at all. We shouldn't even give them money. We should leave. And now I'm hearing the opposite side saying we shouldn't give any money to Israel, we should just leave and not get involved over there. And in fact, we deserve the U.S. bases being attacked and U.S. armed forces being killed just because we're there and we're evil Americans, so we deserve it. And I got to say that those comments from both sides on the two different situations I find very anti-American. I usually don't say things like anti-American, but it is, especially considering that the Russians are hell-bent on destroying the Western world, and they made that very clear. And Hamas in Iran, or in Hezbollah as well, are all hell-bent on destroying the Western world as well. They're quite determined on that. It makes no sense at all to differentiate in between one or the other, and to also try and give leniency to Iran just because people want to look at the situation different. It makes no sense. I'm trying to even explain how it makes no sense. But it's just so senseless to have a different mindset on both of these wars that it's very hard to even explain because they're the same side. It's like saying in World War II, yes, we hate the Empire of Japan because they attacked us at Pearl Harbor, but their allies, the Germans, they're perfectly fine. In fact, we support what they're doing in Europe, and I believe they should take the entire place over. That makes no sense. They're working together, just like the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah, and Hamas are working together right now. They're all one and the same. So if you condemn the Russians in Ukraine, obviously you would have to condemn Hamas and Hezbollah inside of Israel and the Iranians as an extension because they're all in the same group. It's not even anything that we're trying to connect the dots with. A Hamas delegation just arrived in Moscow a few hours ago to talk with Putin. You can't get any more in that sphere than going to talk with Putin, much like the Taliban also went to talk to him as well a while ago. That is obviously aligning Afghanistan with the Russians, and Afghanistan is also aligned with the Chinese as well. And so it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me for people to say that we should just turn a blind eye to Iran attacking U.S. bases in the Middle East. Iran attacking U.S. bases is the same as Russia, China, Hezbollah, or Hamas attacking those bases. And so it's obvious we have to respond, even if it is an escalatory action, to defend our armed forces, to defend our interests around the world, and to not let these thugs and terrorists push us over. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll question says, after the attacks, will Iran heed the warning of the USA and back off from attacking our military bases in the Middle East? It looks like 36% said no, Iran wants war with the USA. 31% said yes, Iran isn't ready for war. 25% said probably not, but maybe. And 8% said unsure. And To be perfectly honest, I don't think Iran is going to heed this warning because Iran behaves like thugs and they don't really take logic that well. We've learned. But I will say that probably not, but maybe. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, can you reread that prompt?
It says, after attacks, will Iran heed the warning of the USA and back off from attacking our military bases?
Probably not. I'm expecting that they probably won't, and that's fine. We'll respond the way the United States needs to, and I'm glad to see, because a lot, and I saw this at the beginning of the stream, when we changed the title to the U.S. launching airstrikes, some people said, oh yeah, but they didn't strike it against the Iranians, it was just their terrorist groups. No, we actually found out a little later it was actually the Iranian army that they had hit directly. It wasn't their terrorist groups or anything like that. It was the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. That is the Iranian army that they hit. And so we don't know what the Iranian response will be to that at the moment. And I have a feeling that now they're going to feel, although they're the ones to provoke this action in the first place by America, they're most likely going to feel that not responding to an attack that was directly levied against their armed forces will probably make them look weak. So they'll probably either ramp up more attacks in the Middle East, or they are going to tuck tail, which is going to be unexpected, and completely withdraw from really everything going on in the Middle East and tell Hamas and Hezbollah to back off. I have a feeling that that's not going to happen, though. I have a feeling that that's the most unlikely option of the two, but I hope that does address that well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our third poll, it says, what is your opinion of Israel? 48% said I support it, but it has its issues. 36% said I support it, it's a great state. 10% said I support it due to U.S. interests, and 6% said I don't support it, Israel is bad. And on this one, I'm actually going to be in the 10%. I mainly support Israel because of U.S. interests, and that pretty much goes for every country that we are allied with around the world. I do believe that these countries have the right to exist because they are sovereign nations, just like any other country, but primarily Israel serves our interests in the Middle East, and I believe that is the primary motivation between us supporting them or not supporting them. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I largely have to agree with Matthew there. I would probably have to fall within the 10% and not go with the majority as well, because Israel does have its faults, and that's something that I don't think anyone can really deny. But at the same time, I feel like it's a little hypocritical for everyone in the United States and also other Western countries to go, Ukraine has faults and corruption, and Israel has faults and corruption. Because guess what everyone has? Faults and corruption. So it's kind of a baseline thing across the whole world. Every government is going to have faults and corruption. It's just kind of accepted. But one thing that's a little different is that a country like, say, South Sudan doesn't really have a lot of impact to the United States strategically. So really anything can happen down there. It doesn't really matter much because we don't have an interest right now in that area of Africa. But in the Middle East, where there's a massive amount of oil production, and who is able to buy that oil and who's not able to buy that oil is a massive determining factor in whose economy gets the upper leg at the end of the day, we have a massive interest there. That's why, although the Saudis have a very questionable background as far as human rights go, among many other things, that's why we inevitably end up being a friend with them. Even when the conditions right now appear to have relations freezing over, we're still having a decent amount to do with them, because we have to secure strategic interests for the United States in the region. Same with Israel. Israel is largely that as well. Israel is something that we can count on as an anchor point in the Middle East. If everything goes wrong, we can always count on Israel to still be there, and that's why we support them. And also I'm going to have to say this really quickly, because I've seen some people continuing the arguments of who's right, the Palestinians or the Israelis. That's beyond the question at this point. The question is now, will the United States support an openly pro-Russian organization inside of Israel, or are we going to support our ally? And at that point, it's very clear and evident we must support our ally. We're not going to support a pro-Russian group. We do not negotiate with the Russians. We're not going to ever allow the Russians to get a leg up anywhere. And if the Hamas and the Hezbollah and Iran want to all align themselves clearly with the Russians, and the Iranians already have done that for over a year at this point, we need to have nothing to do with these people, and we need to crush them. And that's just a clear statement as it is. And I see a lot of people in the chat saying, everyone's wrong or one side's wrong. That does not matter at this point. What matters is who is against us and who is with us. The aspect after Hamas has arrived in Moscow today is completely different now. So I have to say this. I am, on an official level of this channel, throwing out the entire argument of who's in the right, the Israelis or the Palestinians. It's now about who supports America, and well, really the Western world, not just the United States. Who supports the Western world, and who doesn't support the Western world? And Hamas and Hezbollah are obviously groups that do not support the Western world at this point, considering that they're meeting with the Russians, and the Russians are talking about expanding and taking over other countries outside of Ukraine that are NATO members. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, in my opinion, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, we are getting a little trickle of information coming out about the airstrikes that occurred over Syria by the U.S. It looks like we're learning that senior defense officials are saying that it was conducted by 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons of the U.S. Air Force. One of the targets was a weapons storage facility, and the second target was an ammunition storage facility, which was used by the IRGC, which is an Iranian-backed group. So it's unclear if it was directly the Iranian military or not. It may not have been, but it's possible it could be either way. But very interesting. It was F-16s that carried it out, which happens to be the same plane that Ukraine wants. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, that's wonderful to hear that the F-16 is out there still getting its name, winning the bread. Love to see it. And of course, the F-16 is one of the best aircraft we have in our arsenal at the moment, next to the F-15, the F-22s, and the F-35s. The F-35 is no waste of money. Don't listen to that propaganda. The F-35 is one of the best planes out there in the world. Y'all just wait and see. If anything happens and that thing has to get used, I bet you that thing will be like the F-15. We'll probably not even see a single one get shot down. We will see, however, someone bail out of their F-35 and then it goes flying over South Carolina. We will see that, but we won't see the aircraft getting shot down by enemy fire, most likely. At least I got high hopes for that, kind of like the F-15. And did you know that, Matty? Did you know that the F-15 is undefeated?
I think I've heard that, but I don't recall it.
I think it has something like 107 air-to-air kills, and it has not been shot down once. It's the only aircraft in history that has that kind of running record.
Interesting. That's pretty nice. We should send those to Ukraine, too.
Yeah, well, but anyways. Whoa, what do you mean, Jack? That ain't national security. What the hell do you mean? But anyways, with that, we were on to the next.
I was in the hills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping. Anyways. But anyways, seriously speaking, though, that was our last poll question to address. So we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And the first one here goes to Sam Gorishin, who puts in a $50 donation and does not leave a comment. But huge shout out to you, Sam, and thank you very much for that very generous support and helping to keep us running. And Enforcer, what say you?
Thank you so much, Sam Gorishin, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Of course, the support is the only way that we can keep this thing rolling. I gotta thank you so much for throwing it in, because it does make this thing possible. And I've also seen some of y'all, especially Angry Penguin, I saw you specifically in the live chat tonight, saying that YouTube is now threatening your account because you have an ad blocker on. And now I bet a lot of y'all who are going to have to be turning off y'all's ad blockers because now YouTube is going after them with a passion are probably going to start seeing the difference in between a no ad stream and people who run ads, because now y'all are going to be exposed to the whole bulk of them. Of course, we don't run ads and we don't have sponsors. We run this channel entirely off of viewer support, like from you, Sam. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because you help us to be able to keep this thing ad-free and sponsor-free and run it entirely off of viewer support, which I think is a far better way to do it, because we get to run the show how we want, y'all get to enjoy the show how y'all like it, and everyone makes sure to win at the end of the day through that arrangement. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Anonymous, who puts in a $27 donation. And thank you very much, Anonymous, as always, for that support and also being a longtime channel viewer. And they said the line in the sand has been drawn and people are picking sides. And what commodities can Iran and Russia trade with each other? Military wear, tech, or knowledge? Question mark.
Iran doesn't really have a lot to bring to the table, from what we understand. At the moment, the Iranians possibly have some... maybe some additional drones that they could give. It's not much, though. And the Iranians also don't have a lot of technology or knowledge to share or give. And the Russians really don't either. It's kind of just a alliance of convenience for the two. And I don't really think they're going to be getting much beneficial out of it from each other, where one of them gets a leg up that they didn't have before. I just don't think that's going to be happening, at least at this moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that. the best I can, because honestly, it's kind of cut and dry for me. Both of them are pretty bad off. Both of them are relatively poor countries with not really a lot of research and development going on in them, and not enough economic activity to really sponsor that either. So we're probably going to see that they don't really get anything out of each other, rather than the friendship that will probably last for a very short time. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help us to keep this thing rolling, and when it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here tonight. And we always have to thank all of the super chatters who support the channel, because we're quite serious. It's the only way that we're able to keep going behind the scenes and do this as a job, and if it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. So thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last one of the segment goes to the Mr. Anderson, who puts in a $20 donation.
Hey!
And a huge thanks to you. And also, you are a longtime channel legend, but you've changed your name, so it got me confused for just a second, but I did recognize your profile picture. So once again, huge thanks. And he says, I just want to give you both my thanks for keeping us updated and giving up some sleep for us all. And please take a live chat question as well.
And
huge thanks.
And thank you so much, Mr. Anderson, for the kind words and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you for giving us a little bit of thanks for keeping everyone updated and also losing some sleep. I have to also admit that while I've had a lot of busy, and honestly, I think the best way to explain busy as far as I go is like, it's almost like, well, I don't want to say that because I don't know how YouTube's going to take it, but I'm really souped up from busy. But I could even feel right now through the busy that my eyes are starting to like, not really dilate properly, you know. I'm that tired at this point that my eyes are like giving up on me. They're like, you've got to sleep, man. But the thing is that I'm dedicated into getting out the news. And a lot of people say this, that, and whatnot about our channel. But the honest truth is, we could take days off if we wanted to. Well, Matthew actually wants to take days off. He's exhausted, and I do too. I want to take days off. But the thing is about both of us is that while we want to take days off, because honestly, Matthew, let's not kid ourselves, we both kind of want to take days off. But the thing is that we can't, because I feel a massive dedication to getting the news out to y'all. A lot of y'all count on us as y'all's primary source of news from around the world, which weighs heavily on my conscience every day on if we will run one or not, and so we always do. And it just means a great deal. Matthew said untrue in the chat. Matthew's like, untrue? Nah, man.
Man, you stuck that on me like I was the one like trying to shut it down or something.
Well, you know, I was trying to like hint at both of us wanting to take days off, but you know, it honestly is both of us. If we're being quite honest, you know, we were always talking about, man, I'm exhausted. Maybe a day off, and then I sit there and look at all the news, and I go, man, people need to hear about this stuff, and then I go, nah, we'll run one. And then we end up running one. And then Matthew also goes, man, like the news is crazy. We can't not run one. And then we end up running one, although we both want breaks. But still, thank you so much for enjoying the amount of effort we put into this thing, because we are here entirely almost as a point of passion, almost daily. Because if I didn't have a passion for this, with how exhausted we both are right now, we probably would have just burned out and dropped off a while ago and not done this again. And I got to thank you so much for the support, because while it is entirely a work of passion, y'all also make it possible for us to be able to sustain ourselves on this work of passion through y'all support, because y'all help us to be able to pay the bills, pay rent, all that stuff, so that way we can be able to keep this thing rolling. And so thank you so much once again to Mr. Anderson for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and also being an old guard of the Lee Spring Army. And we will make sure to take a question from the live chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And the question from the live chat goes to Bea Arthur, who says, why does Israel have better equipment than Ukraine?
Israel has better equipment than Ukraine simply because Israel has a larger economy and was able to spend a lot more money over decades building up their armed forces compared to Ukraine. If we're being entirely honest, because, you know, now we're moving into the international world, Ukraine's done quite well for what it is militarily, but Ukraine hardly put any money into their military for decades, and it was largely, at least for most of its history, overfunded, underfunded, under-equipped, and ill-prepared for the task at hand. Only over the past few years have army reforms or military reforms in Ukraine started to change that fact and started to change how the Ukrainian military functions, but the Israelis are in a tier that are well above the Ukrainians militarily as far as training goes, equipment, and funding. It's honestly not even comparable to the Ukrainians, and that's why we see that the Israelis have so much better equipment, a lot better trained forces. And also, when I say that, these, and I'm not discrediting the Ukrainians at all. The Ukrainians have done incredibly well through the war in Ukraine. But still, there are noticeable differences in between how the Israeli infantry react to a situation versus how Ukrainian infantry react to a situation, even with Western training. There's a clear difference in between the two, and that's because the Israelis have that much extra funding, that much extra equipment, and that much extra ability because of all that to be able to train their forces, their normal infantry, almost to the level that one would say Ukrainian special forces are at. So there is a big difference, and it largely just comes down to funding and also how long that's lasted. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again, the Mr. Anderson, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for you, and if it wasn't for you being an old guard and continuing to support this channel and keep it running, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on from the Middle Eastern news segment. We don't have a transition tonight, so we're going to be hopping right into Ukraine. And also, just to put this out there, due to time constraints, we are going to have to move through the Ukraine wars, the Ukraine war news a little bit quickly tonight because we have a decent amount of bulletins. And on top of that, I've got to kind of be honest with y'all. Not really a lot happened on the front lines today. There was a Ukrainian counterattack in the area of Avdiivka that appears to have stopped the Russian advance in that area for now. But beyond that, through most of the front lines, there wasn't really that much action, rather than just video clips showing the continuing activities of the Ukrainian armed forces. But moving into our first bits of news, which will be the location unknowns. In our first clip, we got to see some pretty amazing prosthetics that have been given to Ukrainian soldiers that have been wounded in the war. And also, I gotta mute that because it's some kind of song from the 80s. But we can see the prosthetics that are getting right here. And this is actually a defender of the Azovstal that got one of these prosthetic legs, and it looks like he's very nimble with it. And we can see some of the footage that he captured during the siege of Mariupol, way at the beginning of the war. We see them showing some more pictures.
They're doing that edit that everybody does on like the what's it called? Chad memes now.
Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. But anyways, we see him boxing, kicking a soccer ball, which he did pretty damn good. And then that's the end of the clip. But great to see the kind of prosthetics that they're getting these days, because it's certainly a massive improvement in the quality of life for that soldier. But moving on from that, we're moving into the next clip where we got to see some Ukrainian forces in training. And we can see them practicing some squad-level tactics here, firing and then retreating. We can now see them lined up in a pretty big row, firing off their AKs. And Dallas Borakua said, we just go down too many rabbit holes. You were so correct tonight, because we went down so many rabbit holes in the Israel news segment, in the Middle Eastern news segment, that we went well over time compared to what we were trying to shoot for. It was supposed to be an hour-long segment, and it ended up being nearly an hour and a half long. But moving on from that clip, great to see them, of course, continuing training. And moving on to the next clip, we also got to see a little bit of an interview with the Freedom of Russia Legion explaining why they fight, which is very interesting. But here's the clip. When you killed Russians, being yourself a Russian, you did not feel sorry for them? I'm Russian, but on the other side, there are Russians. I feel sorry for Ukrainian children, first of all, whom my cannibal country attacked. There's a battle going on here for good and evil, one might say. Why didn't you sit this one out? Many sit back, and I could not. I can no longer go to the store, buy cigarettes and bread there, and know that part of this money, it will go to the missiles that Putin will launch into Ukraine and kill people with there. I'm in Ukraine because I came here to fight for truth and justice. As soon as I left the country, the painful feeling of guilt that you feel when you were there, it suddenly went away. Are the people to blame? Now they're being asked. A mother who sends her son to war and is glad that she was compensated for it. But I think this is not normal. Today's Russia is a country of victorious cattle. People call up their friends and relatives and say we are being bombed. We are sitting in the basement, and in response he hears, but Russia endured it for a long time. Their children are doomed. Their grandchildren are doomed. Putin doesn't feel sorry for anyone. Russia had enormous potential, but he simply ruined it all. That's why I hate him. He dehumanizes people. He makes them villains and degenerates. When I see him, I feel disgusted.
Me too.
Could you kill him? Yeah, yeah. Oh, man. Is this also how they train in the Russian army? Not at all. The soldiers there are basically disposable. The equipment of one fighter costs more than the posthumous Lada for the Russian mobilized. Also, I like that M1A he's got right there. Look at that. Hey, I like that. It's an M1A tanker that's got a little bit of a tactical stock put on it. But Matthew...
Wait a minute. What's this mice with birch sauce? I mean, what is birch sauce?
I have no idea, Matthew. I don't even think we want to know. I think we're just gonna say it's
like some tree sauce.
Man, it's maple syrup. It's maple syrup. But anyways, they eat mice. Mice can be served with boich sauce, or in its own juice. Ew. However they like.
The guy looking like that when he mentioned it, he looked like.
Man, let me see here. Yeah, he did look like that. I'm happy here now. I know that tomorrow I'll go to the front line and may get killed, but I'll still be happy. I believe in what I do. What I do, it's not in vain. Such people will always defeat a herd of sheep that go to slaughter. Certainly, these are Putin's lackeys. The greatness of Russia is actually a myth, which is simply inflated to squeeze out other people's lands. Prigozhin's rebellion showed how much of a plywood system that Putin built, and that's more than true, how fragile it is. And I realized that, unfortunately, there is no longer a peaceful way to change power in Russia. There's always a choice, and you do not have to become a war criminal, do not have to become cannon fodder, and take part in genocide of a neighboring people from a neighboring state. We have a huge number of supporters of our comrades. They are all waiting for our X. They are waiting for us to come in so that they can join us. By the way, I just want to really quickly mention, everyone, that the M1A right here is, of course, based off of the M14, and the M14 was based off of a prototype that was originally supposed to be a light machine gun for the U.S. Army in World War II, and then that evolved into the M1 Garand. This is practically an M1 Garand, as far as you really want to be concerned with how this thing works. And even now, after the M1 Garand was introduced into Army service in 1937 as the standard issued rifle, they are still finding ways for some iterations of the M1 Garands to make their way to the front line. Really cool. And Angry Penguin said it's an M1A. Yeah, and that's kind of like what I was trying to get to there, because it's hard to get to like the evolution of that, because you would think an M1A is, you know, just like an evolved M1 Garand, but it's actually the semi-automatic version of the M14. And then the M14 was a prototype. It was like the T-38A1 or something like that, that John Garand made in the mid-30s as a prototype Army light machine gun to replace the bar with. The Army didn't like the machine gun concept, but they said, could you turn this thing into a battle rifle? And so Garand went back to the drawing table and turned the light machine gun design, which looks a lot like the M14 if you ever see pictures of it, and he turned it into the M1 Garand. So largely it is an M1 Garand, or more so the M1 Garand is an evolution of the M14 in a sort. But still, this thing made it to the battlefield even now, which is just very impressive from a historical standpoint. And also, I know Angry Penguin, but I was confusing the hell out of everyone, and then I said it again and probably confused people even more. But the defeat of the Russian army is a matter of time, no matter how colossal it may seem. And with that, that's the end of that clip, and I gotta say, pretty cool, and pretty nice to know why the Freedom of Russia Legion fights. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see some Ukrainian soldiers digging on a trench. You see them all here getting ready to take out a stump. When you see them rolling the stump away, and this guy getting a little handsy with a hatchet. Easy now. And also, John, I've heard the M14 is completely unusable on full auto. A lot of people complained about that, and I think that's one of the biggest gripes they had about the M14 is that on auto, it was just almost practically unusable, so it was really just a semi-automatic, kind of like the M1 Garand. Although it fired a 3... Anyways, I'm going down a rabbit hole on that, because I really like the M1 Garands and the M14s. I think they're pretty cool, but the M14 did have some inherent flaws, and I don't even know how it won over the FAL. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the Russian casualty report for the day.
Hey, 3 bomb cuts, let's go!
3! Bled! It's the Holy Trinity. But on top of that, while they lost 3 Bobcats, they also lost 810 soldiers, 18 armored personnel carriers, 33 supply trucks, 29 main battle tanks, a whopping number, 30 artillery systems, 17 drones, 1 MLRS, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. Overall, a very impressive day as far as the Ukrainians being able to inflict losses onto the Russian armed forces. Moving on into our frontline news in the northeast, we got to see that some CV-90s were once again spotted on the front line. Largely just a picture of the thing. It has some kind of a desert tan thermal wrapping on it, which is pretty neat. But beyond that, just a normal CV-90 in the northeast. Moving on from that and down into the area of Kremenna, we also got to see a BTR-82 on the move today in this part of the front line. We can hear the engine roaring. We can see the Ukrainians pouring. And we can see them firing the 30mm. They're still lighting the place up. But that's the end of the clip. Really nice to see a Ukrainian BTR-82 in action. Moving on from that and past the area of Bakhmut, we did get a little bit of news in the Avdiivka area. Nothing happened in Bakhmut today. And we got to see that the 92nd, which is very similar to the fighting 93rd, and also in the same area of the front line, was able to hit a BMP-1. And we're going to be muting that. But we can see the 92nd's intro. Pretty cool. Bussin', of course. And we can see the BMP down there. It's right there. And we now see the FPV drone coming on in. And it hits right in the side of the turret, sending the thing into a massive fireball. That's
Bong,
the end.
bong.
Bang, bang, bong, bong. But that's the end of that BMP, and that one will not be binging and bonging anymore. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Freedom of Russia Legion fighting in the area around Toretsk and Orlivka. Here's the clip. When you see the intro for the Freedom of Russia Legion, we see them whipping out the Mavic. And there it goes. When you see it looking down to the ground below and finding the Russians immediately. The Ukrainians call on the mortar fire and start sending it out their way.
I wonder if the Russians have ever tried to like catch the thing before it hits the ground, because that's probably the only way they could save it.
You know, Matthew, I think what they could do, Matthew, is they could pull out that their shovel and they could just quickly dig a tunnel to the center of the earth and then just, you know, grab the tunnel and just scoot it to wherever the mortar shell is falling and then let it fall through there.
Oh yeah, that Wile E. Coyote type beat.
Yeah, that Bugs Bunny crap. But we can see them hitting the Russian forces very effectively. The fire here is quite accurate. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but great to see the Freedom of Russia Legion, of course, doing its thing in that area. Meanwhile, we also got to see in the area of Bielorushinsky that smoke was rising from a Ukrainian ATACMS launch, which apparently was quite devastating to Russian forces. You see the clip right here. The smoke rising into the sky.
Огонь, огонь, огонь. Это прилет по-любому. Да что ты так думаешь?
Call the fire brigade. The fire brigade's moving on in.
Ебать, пиздец.
Иди нахуй. And that's the end of the clip, but of course, some pretty decent losses. We also got to see some remains of the ATACMS as well, which was also pretty neat. You can see the remains in these pictures here. And everyone's just kind of looking. You can also see the fire that they caused a little bit earlier on. Wonderful. Wonderful stuff to see. Good to know the Russians are being smacked around by a nice little American vessel. Once again showing them why the Americans are going to win the war if a war ever happened. Moving on from that and the area outside of Luhansk, we're now going to be moving on into Avdiivka. And I'm going to be showing y'all the front line in this area, considering there's a massive battle happening here. Over the past 24 hours, not really much has changed, or really happened for that matter. And from what we understand, the Ukrainians are counterattacking this area around Krasnoyarivka at the moment. It appears to be some kind of a delaying action against the Russian push, and it does appear to have been successful, at least for today. Moving on into the two clips we got from the area, we got to see a Russian tank exploding on the northern flank, and then on the southern flank, we also got to see something somewhat similar. Oh! Watch this nuclear fusion happening live on air while that music's playing. Wow.
That was a huge explosion. That was like those big bombs that Israel likes to use.
Yeah, I kind of like that. And look, the Russians made it portable. But moving on from that, really nice to see a tank being destroyed in the area. And on to the southern flank around Opitne, we did get to see a Russian armored personnel carrier being destroyed here as well. And here it comes. And we can see one up here, the lead vehicle. The infantry's dismounting. Here comes the MTLB behind it.
Oh, he's blocking the road. Oh, look at that spinning. Look at it go.
Dude, call up the freaking city council. There's a roadblock.
This was a big explosion. Big Lee. Flippin' flipper. Look at it go.
I've got to tell you, a lot of people, a lot of guys would just sit there and watch the MTLB roll up. Not these guys. They dropped the mine, and the thing went sky high. I've never seen anything like it. You've never seen anything that tall. You haven't even seen my skyscrapers get that tall. Thing got blown up badly. It was spinning like a top, or spinning more like, well, I won't say that. But anyways, that's the end of that clip right there. And we're going to be moving on from that little clip. Great to see, of course, the Russian forces getting schmacked. Moving on into the area of Marinka, we also got to see a Ukrainian mortar working on some Russian positions. Sadly, we'll have to keep the clip muted. But you can see them putting the cheese rags onto the back of the mortar shell, getting ready to fire it, adjusting the mortar tube. Hanging the round, and then dropping it. And then he gets up and walks back over to the camera. And they have a little moment. And then the video ends. But great to see Ukrainian mortar in service. Moving on from the area of Marinka and on down into the southern front, we also got to see near the village chain an Italian M109 in use. Unfortunately, due to this video being 3 minutes and 50 seconds long, and us probably not having the time to watch this entire clip at the moment, because I have to let y'all know, we are exhausted at the moment, and I'm trying to make sure that we actually get some sleep, because a lot of my classes were canceled tomorrow, so I may actually have some time to get at least 6 or 7 hours of sleep. So we're going to be skipping this little clip. If you want to see it, though, go click on the link in the description below for the Ukraine War Map Day 610, or the Day 610 Ukraine War Map, and you'll be able to go directly to Velika Novosilka and watch that clip at your own speed and your own pace. These maps are custom made here every single day, just like Publix Bakery makes bread, and you can always find the maps in the link in the description below. Moving on to the side of Bajania, we also get to see the Ukrainians conducting a night assault in this area. We're going to be muting that. Because did y'all know that apparently some of this music is copyright? I didn't know until yesterday. We played a United 24 clip, and lo and behold, they didn't have a license for the music that was in the clip. So we ended up getting content ID'd for that, and so we largely are muting everything now, again. But we see the Russians crawling around their little trenches, doing their thing, and of course the Ukrainians are watching them do their thing, and they better make them stop doing their thing. We can see some kind of rats and gerbils crawling around on the ground too, all around them. Probably rats from the trash that they leave around. But this is all about to be over for these Russians. We can see here the Russians getting blasted. We can see the Ukrainians have now entered the trenches. They're starting to clear these folks out, clear the suckers out. Look at them, they're lobbing nades at the Russians. Russians are panicking, freaking out. They're panicking because Anakin doesn't have a planikin about how the hell to get out of this. We see the drone watching as they continue to clear the trenches. We see the Ukrainians greasing some of them like it's the mob in the 50s. They do paint houses. Or more so
man,
trenches.
he turned him into a mannequin.
Man, look at that. The Russians are panicking as the Ukrainians turn them into a mannequin. I'll tell you what, we're trying to make rhymes out here. Busting rhymes like the Ukrainians are busting Russian asses. And we can see them now moving down the trench to the last outpost that has a couple of Ruskies in it. And of course, these are about to taste the fire and the flame of the Ukrainian nades. And we can see the Ukrainians lobbing them in. That one exploded on the lip. But don't worry, the Ukrainians are about to bust the Russians' lips inside of the trenches as they start to light the place up like it's the 4th of July. Look at that. We see them tossing another nade in, of course, making sure to get them good. And we can see that that one went right, well, actually above the lip again, once again busting their lip. But that's the end of the clip, and great to see the Ukrainians clearing out some places and making sure to take care of business. Moving on from Avdiivka and the great news we saw there, we also heard in the south that some S-400s apparently were attacked by ATACMS, and about 3 of them have been destroyed, according to the information that we got. This also looks a lot like the clip we got in the Luhansk area earlier, so from what we assume, this is most likely the same clip. So, we're going to delete it here in a minute, just so that way we can try and clarify that as best as possible, because from what we know, this happened at Bilorushinsk. So, with that, that's the end of that clip there. Wonderful to see the S-400s on fire. And we're now going to be moving on into the area of Rabotny, where we also get to see some Ukrainian soldiers firing off a Mark 19 grenade launcher. We hear them getting the orders.
Плюс-плюс можем.
We now see him moving down the trench network.
Плюс.
And the music starts, which is why I had my finger over the mute button, so we can immediately stop that and make sure that y'all don't have to watch ads. Well, you now see them lining up the grenade launcher, getting ready to shoot a couple of rounds out of this thing, and we can see them popping them off. Popping off like Popeye the Sailor, but these guys don't need spinach. You know what they need, Matthew?
They need some milk.
That's right. I don't know where I was going with that. We'll work with that. And we can see them now reloading it with some more grenades. Pulling the cock and handle bag to get the thing ready to go. And now we can see them laying out the heat again. Look at that. They're sending the Easter eggs down range. Each one of them has a Russian name on it. Vadim, Joey, Bob, Sue. Typical Russian names.
Oppenheimer.
Damn commies. Oh, man, that movie sat there the entire time, Matthew. Was like, see, Oppenheimer is no commie. Well, he was literally a commie historically. It's like, he's a commie. Like, it is what it is, man. It's like, anyways, we see them firing off the Mark 19. And you now see them checking out that Mark 19. And then the video ends there. But of course, wonderful to see them using a little grenade launcher. Moving on from that and into the area of Peremoshny, we also got to see a UR-77 meteorite getting destroyed by Ukrainian forces here today. But you see the destroyed little sad spot where this MTLB is. There it is. There's the meteorite. It's about to blow up, of course. Watch and loin. Watch this drive, in the words of George Bush. Damn.
No.
Oh my lord.
Could they have made it any more dramatic? Look at that little ashes falling down the ground too. It's like raining.
It's raining, man. That's it. It's raining Russians. Oh my god, it's gone. There's nothing left.
What? No.
Yeah. that thing is gone.
Oh, German? Yeah.
Yeah, jawohl. But look at that.
Oh.
Take
Take it easy. Take it easy.
Geschnick my like me. But anyways, we can see that the little MTL, well, the UR-77 is gone, and there's nothing left. Moving on from that, it is now time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So let me go pull that up real quick. Now let's make sure he has a new one. And he do be having a new one. And so, without further...
speech for the night, please.
And so, without further ado, here is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So, without further ado, speech. Here you go.
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Сьогодні є рішення про 2 нових пакети оборонної підтримки від Америки і Данії. Американський пакет – це, зокрема, ракети для ППО, ракети для хаймарсів, боєприпаси, в тому числі 155-й калібр. Загальний обсяг цього американського пакету – $150 мільйонів. Я дякую президенту Байдену, його команді, Конгресу Сполучених Штатів і усім американцям, які цінують свободу. Дуже важливо, щоб у ворогів свободи не виникало ілюзій, нібито захист свободи може не витримати оборонного марафону. Вагомий данський пакет – більше $500 мільйонів. Це додаткова бронетехніка для наших воїнів, танки, БМП, дрони, снаряди для артилерії. Я дякую тобі, Данія. Це те, що дійсно допомагає нам берегти життя наших людей на фронті. Сьогодні ж говорив з пані прем'єр-міністром Данії Метте Фредеріксен дуже предметно якраз про наповнення нашої подальшої оборонної співпраці, про збереження єдності в Європі та серед усіх наших партнерів та про нашу формулу миру. Я вдячний Данії за готовність реально наближати виконання пунктів формули. Продовжуємо готувати зустріч на Мальті щодо формули миру. Додаємо ще учасників. Взяв участь в роботі Європейської ради, були лідери країн ЄС, президент Євроради Шарль Мішель, також президентка Єврокомісії Урсула фон дер Ляйн, президентка Європарламенту Роберта Мецола. Євросоюз готує кілька кроків, яких ми очікуємо. Це стосується і нових санкцій проти Росії, і нових кроків в підтримці України. Ми особливо очікуємо політичного рішення ЄС про початок переговорів щодо членства нашої держави. І зі свого боку ми робимо все, щоб бути готовими. Сьогодні я підписав один із найважливіших законів на цьому шляху до початку переговорів – закон про ПЕПів – політично значущих осіб. Цей закон додає сили фінансового моніторингу життя ключових державних посадовців та народних депутатів. І його ухвалення є чітким сигналом того, наскільки серйозно Україна сприймає завдання приєднатися до Європейського Союзу та зробити роботу своїх державних інституцій дійсно чистою. І, звичайно, фронт. Сьогодні я провів військовий кабінет, особливий формат роботи з командувачами, керівники розвідки, Служби безпеки України, міністром оборони, доповіді з кожного бойового напрямку, генерали наші, Сирський, Тарнавський, Гнатов, Москальов, Содоль, главком, Залужний, керівник ГУР, Буданов, керівник зовнішньої розвідки Литвиненко. Наші стратегічні завдання – постачання для воїнів снаряди, техніки, український оборонно-промисловий комплекс. Нарощуємо наші можливості та чіткіше бачимо завершення війни українською перемогою. Звичайно, усі ми маємо усвідомлювати, ворог непростий і простіше не стане, але Україна має стати і стане потужніше. Саме так, щоб ми назавжди зафіксували в історії, що Російська імперія на українську землю більше не прийде. Слава усім нашим воїнам. Хлопці, я дякую вам за кожну знищену російську позицію. Слава усьому нашому народу. Слава Україні.
And
Героям слава!
And Rom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, of course, rounding out the Ukraine war news segment and moving us into the next part of the show. A very fun part, because we get to talk to all of y'all for about the next 40 minutes or so. Yippee! And so, what in the world do we have to talk about, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our final question and poll segment, our first of two polls says, should we cut the streams down to 2 hours to conserve time and end early? 63% said yes, no need for very long streams. 21% said no, we need all the time used. And 15% said unsure and undecided. And also, y'all give us your thoughts in the live chat. My proposal was this. That we don't cut down the news, because that's what everybody's here for certain, and we don't want to compromise the quality of that under any circumstance. So keep that as normal. But when we get to the questions and super chat segment, cut the question and answers down to about a minute at most each. So that way, because that's most of the time, in my opinion, the most time-consuming segment of the stream, which rivals almost the time spent in the news segment. I think we could do probably a minute a question and be probably much better off with time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would love to do a minute a question, but sometimes the questions require longer answers. Just because this is something that we've discussed in the background behind the scenes on the channel, and largely the conclusion is that there's really no way to do that, because really the only thing we can do is cut down on polls, because polls eat up as two segments about around 40 minutes each. But they're, no polls are being cut down, and we're also having to address questions as long as they do. Because for people to support the channel, I always want to make sure that we give y'all the proper amount of time and make sure to answer y'all's questions as best as we possibly can. Because while y'all support us, of course, just to help the channel to keep on running, if y'all have a question attached to it, I also want to make sure that we put in as much effort as possible to give y'all an appropriate or good answer to the question, even if it takes a while. And so, with that, it's interesting to see that a lot of y'all will be fine with it being cut down to 2 hours, but it would probably be a very daunting, if not impossible, task to do, because that means that our stream would be over in 6 minutes right now, and we're not even done with the polls. So I don't know what I would do unless if I just say thanks to all of y'all about 20 times or so, and then we just round out immediately and never answer questions. And so with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says, let's see here. If a major war breaks out in the Middle East, would you volunteer for the armed forces? 63% said I can't, I'm disabled or advanced age. 15% said yes, I would certainly enlist. 15% said no, I would not. And 7% said I might if it gets bad. And on this one, it looks like a ton of people are either disabled or of advanced age, aka getting old. Nothing wrong with that, and it happens. We'll be there one day as well. But 63%, that is a lot. So only 15% said I would certainly enlist. And for me, I would say that the situation that I would enlist in is if the thing broke out into a world war and it was a world encompassing conflict, then I would certainly go and join up no matter what the circumstances were, regardless if I was in law school or not. I'd probably want to go fight in that because it would be very hard for me to get focused on anything else, knowing that I'm of fighting age and able to help out. And if I wasn't, I would feel kind of crappy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that if a war breaks out, I would I wouldn't enlist. I would try and see about going into officer training school to go that route, considering that we have college degrees. I wouldn't want it to be thrown into the waste or the wayside. But I would see. Of course, though, have to put this out there because I know that there's going to be people, because I have a feeling that this would probably be inevitable. I have, not to put out too much medical information about myself, but I have double major scoliosis of a pretty serious degree. And the last time I tried to see if I could join the Army, which was my original plan in life, was to try and join the Army and then go to officer training school and then commission as an officer after being enlisted for a while. I found out I could not do that because when I was being checked out, it was found out that I had double major scoliosis, which had never been detected at any point in my life, and it was such a serious degree that the recruiter said even with a waiver, it would not be possible for me to even join. So with that in mind, I would enlist, but I don't know if they'll actually even take me or not. I hope that in that instance, they would just kind of, skirt over that and allow me to join anyways, because I'd be more than happy to go over there. But if they don't take me for medical reasons, I really can't control that. And I saw someone say no excuses. I mean, hell, what am I supposed to do? Straighten out my back? I mean, really? I mean, that's not an excuse. The recruiter told me I couldn't join, even with a waiver, because it was that damn bad. I can't just straighten out my back on the snap of a dime or anything like that. But with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll to address, so we are moving back into our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $50 Super Chat from Peter. And he puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Peter, for that support. He says, have you thought of having a tequila sunrise on a sunbed on a tropical island via VR to soothe and relax you? That sounds kind of good. But to be honest with you, I think, I don't know about the Enforcer, but if I touched a tequila sunrise, I'd probably become an alcoholic because pretty quickly, because I'd be like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. I don't feel so tired anymore with this tequila, but then you'd be all screwed up. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say thank you for the massive support first off, Peter, and helping the channel to run. And second off, I'd have to agree with Matthew. If I had a tequila sunrise, I have a feeling I'd probably start drinking till sunset every day. So it'd be a tequila sunrise sunset more so. And it's an interesting idea. But I'm never really one into relaxing much. I saw Santa Claus of all people is in the live chat right now and said, you ought to rest a little bit and get out of the boomer work mindset. Man, I can't, man. I can't do it while I have a voice crack. I cannot do that. I cannot, I'm not really one for relaxing much. I'm really one for working. I mean, there will be like intermittent times where I do something I enjoy. Like the things I enjoy the most are either playing a game because it's very quick to do, or going for a range day and shooting some guns. Those are really the only two things that I do outside of working on law school or YouTube that kind of makes me have a little bit of fun for a little bit, but I'm just not really into the idea of having a lot of fun, especially with what we cover. And I really don't like the way that looks when other people do it. And that's largely why I don't do it, because I look at other people and it's like, hey, y'all, I just covered how, 1,500 people just died yesterday. Meanwhile, I'm going to go to the swimming pool at this resort here and have fun and show all of y'all that. And I'm like, that just doesn't really look good. And I don't really like the idea of that. So that's largely why I don't lay back and relax or really enjoy much, just because I think it looks bad, especially with the kind of things that we cover and, work on. But with that, thank you so much for the mass amount of support, Peter. And beyond myself punishing myself for working, I do thank you for the idea, because that was a kind thought. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And the next one goes to KG, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, KG, as well, for that support. It says, when this is all over, Israel is not going to be so neutral in Ukraine versus Russia. Like everything else these dictators do, it will ultimately backfire against them.
And I would say, I thank you for the support, KG. And Israel's not going to be so neutral in Ukraine for like everything else these dictators do. It'll ultimately backfire against them. Is he saying that in reference to Israel, or who?
He's saying that in reference to Israel. And to be honest, I don't think Israel's really necessarily being neutral in the Ukraine versus Russia war. I think there's sort of, they're not taking such a strong direct role in trying to support Ukraine, but they do support them.
Well, Israel has provided Ukraine with armored cars and some infantry equipment in the past. Not an incredibly large amount of it, but they have provided it nevertheless. And they've clearly picked Ukraine's side in the war. It's just that they haven't sent the Iron Domes, which a lot of people, and I have to say this, a lot of people are always quick to rush nowadays to just try and condemn and damn people as quick as they can. Israel is pro-Ukrainian. It's not as pro-Ukrainian as other countries, and it has provided support to them. But just because they didn't provide the Iron Dome, I don't think that's any reason to have a knock against them. Also, hindsight being 2020, if they had given all of the Iron Domes that Ukraine wanted, that's wonderful for Ukraine. Now what defends Israel from Hamas that's fired thousands of rockets over the past few weeks? More of those, almost all of those rockets would have ended up hitting their targets and killing an unknown number of Israeli civilians. So in all honesty, with hindsight being 2020, it was probably a great thing that Israel never did provide the Iron Domes, because they're already being overwhelmed with all of Israel's Iron Domes being inside the country right now. But I do thank you for the support, KG. And I guess that I think you and me may be seeing that a little bit differently. Of course, Netanyahu is a little bit of a questionable leader, especially with how he came back into power. There's no denying that. But nevertheless, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But it is great to know that Israel and Ukraine are certainly seeing common footing and certainly growing their bonds a lot stronger due to the common enemy they all have at hand. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to William Klin, who puts in a 20 and does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, William, for that support. And I think that is your first, or one of your first, super chats of the channel. Hey! And welcome to the LSA, and thank you so much for helping to keep us running and help us to keep delivering the news. And we do appreciate it very much. And we also have a $20 super chat from Rich T, who says, great work, guys, and this is definitely my favorite channel. And I love to hear it. I like to hear it.
And thank you so much for the support, Rich T, and supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. There's folks like you. I've got to come up with something new to say to y'all, because I even hate hearing this at this point. I thank you so much, though, for helping the channel to keep running, and thank you for saying it's your favorite channel, because it means a lot to us that so many people find this to be the channel to watch and the channel to be at. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And of course, thank you for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ed, who puts in a $10 super chat. And he says, LSA Irish Ed here.
Hey!
Cartman accent. I have to say I'm not familiar with what a Cartman accent is. But he said, Matt touched on prepping yesterday, and possible for the LSA leaders to put a small page about shortwave, Faraday box, and to keep the LSA in touch in case of SHTF. We're all family. And I gotta say, Ed, I am an amateur little prepper myself. I don't really have a ton of stuff that I have to prep, but I do have some basics. I do know about the shortwave radios. I don't have a Faraday box. I have a Faraday bag, and also a couple of other things as well. But I'm not sure if the Enforcer totally jumps into the prepping world or not. But Enforcer, what say you?
To answer your comment, Ed, I actually don't really get into prepping much at all. My mindset is largely that if civilized society collapses as it is today, most people, regardless of how well your prepping is, are most likely going to be up the creek without a paddle, especially us, considering we live in the middle of suburbia. There would not be a lot of an ability to be able to survive in a end of world situation. So with that, I'm not really into prepping for that reason. Into collecting rifles, though. I do that, but I don't really get into the prepping side of things because, to me, it seems that it would largely be for naught, especially with our situation, with how we live and where we are. But still, thank you so much once again for support. We will consider something like that, because we've always had a plan of the LSA becoming something greater, like some kind of what's the best way to explain it? Like a civil defense group, like civil defense used to be back in the day, where, it's all about helping out the nation in disasters, stuff like that, or, internationally helping out every Western nation when there's a disaster, like, say, a war or an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane. Now, I think that would be really neat if the LSA turned into something like that, but it will take a while for the LSA to grow to be big enough that
something like that could be possible. But still, I think it would be pretty neat. And I wonder if you think it's neat, IRSTRIKES. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a $15 super chat. And huge thanks to you, Duncan, as always, for that support. And he says, Bob Muba, Matt's new commanding officer, shouted, Baba, Grizzly Valakin, 50 push-ups, meow quack. Matt replied, Moo moo, I get no respect around here. Ruff ruff. Tried at 1800, no respect. Kermit picked up the call. Oh, damn, Kermit picked it up. Woof,
Hi. I'd like to tell you I support the Paris Commune, but still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, Duncan VR throwing in the animal noises. Geschlick my Lightman! And no, and Bruce Lee said, LSA militia? No, I don't touch militia. The National Guard and the Army's here for that. I don't think the LSA should be like a armed group at all. That's nothing that really is up my fancy. You know, if we need the force of arms, the Army and the National Guard will take care of it. I'm more so into a
But a well-regulated militia, though. It says it.
Yeah, it might say it for that reason, but I'm not getting into that at all because that militia stuff is usually nothing but bad business, and there's a whole bunch of drama that goes. I usually try and avoid that completely as an idea. If you want to get into something that has arms in it, that's an organized group, the Army and the National Guard are the way to go. But moving on from that, thank you so much for throwing in the animal noises, Duncan, and helping the channel to keep on running. Of course, geschlick my Lightman, and thank you once again for being a channel legend, Duncan, supporting this channel, helping us keep this thing rolling, and not only that, also making sure to throw in the animal noises. It's a tradition. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Matt Cheer, who puts in a $10 donation. And huge shout out to you, and thank you very much for the support. And I think that is one of the first super chats you put in. So a huge shout out to you, Matt. And I said, thank you for being a useful voice in the world. And today I activated this credit card just to show support. And your show is important to us all.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. That's quite a high honor that you activated a credit card just to support this channel. And thank you so much, Matt, for enjoying the channel. Thank you, Matthew, for being here on this channel with us right now. And thank you for really respecting what we do. It means a lot to us. You know, of course, we get no respect around here. Like Rodney said, oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. And I got to thank you so much for being someone who does appreciate our channel. It means a lot to us, especially with everything that's always going on. And without folks like you, we probably wouldn't even be inspired enough to be able to get on stream and do this every single day. We toil and suffer for folks like you. And so thank you so much once again, Matt, for the support. And also, I guess Matt is throwing out a cheer right there. Matthew, cheer for us. Cheer, damn it.
Yay!
Yeah! So with that, thank you so much once again, Matt, for the support. With that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Psyops, who puts in a 10. And it's good to see once again Psyops, and thank you very much for that support. He says Russian lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody. Let's see here. Babushka just committed a crime. Invading Ukraine was unjustified. Babushka life had just begun, and how Putin throwing it all away.
And I gotta thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And Matthew, do you understand what that means?
I believe that's a riff on the Bohemian Rhapsody. The Bohemian.
Interesting. The Bohemian. Is that like a hotel?
Yeah, it's also a place out in California.
Ah, nice. Interesting. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that well, now that I understand what the Bohemian is, apparently. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from AMX10 Speed Bang Bang, and thank you very much for that support. And for some reason, that got me speedy talking too when I said Speed Bang Bang. I said, "Dear LSA, I am not often here much live, including today, but I love your live chat questions, and can I get one of those, please? Please."
And of course you can, AMX10, and thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on rolling. Folks like you help to make this thing possible, and if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to help. We wouldn't be able to keep this channel running to even get to a live chat. And so with that, what do we got?
Everybody in the chat saying Queen. I don't know what that's about. No, I know it's a band. I know it's a band. And also I knew that was a song as well, but I'm not sure the enforcer knew it was a song. But anyways, the live chat question goes to Marshall, who says, have you seen that India and Pakistan are actively fighting now or Kashmir?
I haven't seen that. It's kind of a semi-normal occurrence. But if it's starting to become a serious ordeal, we may try and cover that. as well, although I feel like we'll be stretching ourselves incredibly thin picking up a third news segment. But we will look into it and at least try and make something, some news about it if it's starting to turn into a serious event. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again, AMX10, for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Strax99, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, Strax, very much for that support, and we do appreciate it very much. And we also have a $10 super chat from Junebug72, who says thank you, and please take a LC from our chat. And Slava Ukraine, I'm Ystriel Chai Slava, Ukraini. God bless America. Have a good evening and stay well.
And thank you so much for the kind words and the support, of course, helping the channel to keep on rolling. And thank you so much once again for being here with us tonight. Matthew, did he want a live chat?
Yes, they did.
Let's get it then.
And the live chat question goes to Plexus Gaming, who says, any confirmations about Russian soldiers captured while fighting with Hamas?
Hang on, reread that one again.
Any confirmations about Russian soldiers captured while fighting with Hamas?
No, we have not heard that at all. I think Russia's support is most likely going to be material, or at least thoughts and prayers. It's not going to be anything physical where Russian soldiers are inside of the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. At least that's what we're assuming at the moment. So I haven't heard about that. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well. And thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Siri, who says, thank you for the good work, you two, and do you have any Israeli or Palestinian friends, and have you shared a meal with a Palestinian or an Israeli? If not, I encourage you to do so. Food unites people. And Siri, I will say this real quick. I don't have anything personally against the Palestinians, and I don't have anything against the Israelis. I have nothing against either party. People are free to believe what they want to believe. That's not up to me to tell them what they should or shouldn't believe. The only problem I have is when people start wrongfully killing people and conducting terrorism. That's where I draw the line. And if either of the parties do that, I won't support either one of them. I've seen the let me fix my headphones real quick, by the way.
Damn, your audio is glitching really bad. Are you good?
Yeah, my headphones screwed up for a second. Am I good?
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah, so what was the last thing you heard me say? It switched over to my iPad for some reason.
Heard you say something about you don't condemn either people and ...
Yeah, don't condemn either people. They can believe what they want to believe, but the moment they start doing nasty things to civilians and conducting terrorism, that's where I say forget it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would largely have to agree with that as well. We also have friends, not going to get in particulars, but they are from the area, from that general region, and, everything along with that. And we have talked to them. We've eaten with them, but we haven't eaten, like, actual Middle Eastern food. One day we will get around to that, though. They offered us, and I was like, oh, that would be cool. I don't know if they're watching tonight right now, but, it would still be neat. But anyways, I don't have anything against the two groups. They're just groups of people like every other. But the thing is that they are being led by organizations or governments. And these organizations and governments are either pro-American or they're anti-American. And while the people of Israel aren't the ones that are going to be invading Palestine, it's going to be the Israeli army led by the Israeli government. And, of course, the average Palestinian citizen isn't the one attacking the Israelis. It's Hamas, which leads the Gaza Strip and also operates in the West Bank. These two forces, however, do inflict deaths onto civilian populations, and that's what we detest. And also on top of that, there's now a larger geopolitical concern at play with Hamas and Hezbollah now clearly being Russian aligned and Iranian aligned. Those are two anti-American countries. Israel is a pro-American and pro-Western country, and so inevitably we have to end up supporting Israel because of that as well. And so with that, I hope that does address that question best I can. And thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running, and also throwing in a word of reason there. I respect that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Blue Flam 777 LSA, who puts in a 10 and says, I'd rather you both live well, but for my sake, in the voice of Gunny Ernie, step it up, sons, adjust your atty. Tude. Okay, attitude, I think I meant to say, and stand tall and strong. This is for real for you, solely your, if you're worthy, and question to chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Blue Flam 777, and helping the channel to keep on running. And also, everyone always wants us to go live it up. I don't know. I guess that's kind of like a YouTube thing. I don't know. I guess I guess I'm not really into that though. It's like a mindset thing. I'm just into working until you drop dead, especially on something like this. That's kind of my mindset. That's kind of why I throw everything to the wind. Like, yeah, I drink enough coffee that it'll probably cause issues later on down the road. But that's a temporary thing to make sure that we run this show and everything else. And I can promise you this, while everyone wants us to have some time off and enjoy good times, I promise y'all, we're going to just be stepping it up continuously. We're probably going to get back to making short war summaries here soon in the future and all of that. So, it will be a thing. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Blue Flam, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you once again. And we will make sure to get a question from the chat.
And the question from the chat goes to Stephen Wisenot, who says, U.S. looking real weak unless they're hitting stuff in Iran. And does the U.S. look weak, and should we respond more accordingly?
I don't think we looked that weak, at least off of the initial news that it was some kind of a Iraq Revolutionary Guard Corps base being hit. I don't really see anything weak about that in particular. So, going off of that, I don't really see much bad about it. I think it's actually a move in the right direction because that leaves us room to escalate to directly attacking Iran and give them a chance to back off. And I think that's what we're doing at the moment is we're giving them one last chance. This is something of a warning shot for them to back off. And then if they don't back off, then we go in all the way. So I don't think it's that bad. I think this is certainly moving in the right direction. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cliff SATX, who puts in a $50 donation. And huge thanks to you, Cliff, for that support. And sadly, no comment to address on that one. But it says number 1 on it. And I don't know if that is your first ever super chat. I could have sworn I've seen you put one in before, but maybe not. But thank you very much for that support. And Forcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on rolling. You didn't throw in a comment, but that's how we're able to be here tonight is through your support. And so thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to 655, who puts in a 10 and says, thanks guys for keeping common sense alive. And thank you for liking common sense, because some people hate it. Some people go berserk after they hear common sense. They don't want to hear it.
And I thank you so much for enjoying our common sense approach to stuff. I don't get into the stupidity of the modern world. Just being quite honest with y'all, I don't really get into the stupidity of political parties because nothing they say makes any sense or even aligns with the other statements they make. I'm glad we don't get into that because it allows us the freedom to really just do what we want. Although I will say it ends up getting us hated by a good amount of people because we just don't agree with everything that everyone says on one side or the other. We don't agree with really anyone. And I would rather stand on our own and do our own thing and be disliked by a good amount of people rather than to just fall in and be another voice in the crowd of everyone saying the same stuff, either opinion A or opinion B. That makes no sense. And I got to thank you for appreciating the channel and how we run it because, it's quite unique. You don't see this kind of stuff on YouTube. You just see everyone parroting the major talking points of the day from point A or point B. And I'm glad that you do enjoy that we do our own thing here. And so thank you once again for the support. And your support helps us to be able to do that because otherwise we would have to appeal to sponsors or AdSense. And we would have to try and make sure to appease both of those. And then that would kind of lead us down just saying whatever the prevailing comment of the day was. And so with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in an $8 super chat and says, you guys know how I feel, and I'm sponsoring a live chat question. And we do know how you feel, Margaret. Thank you very much for your support as usual, and it really does mean a lot to us. And thank you very much for helping support the Coffee Fund, and the Pizza Fund, and the other fund, and the Sleep Fund. And also, we will grab that live chat question, and it goes to Jack, who says, aren't Iran's airplanes ancient American planes? I seem to remember recently them putting F-4s into underground hangars or something really old.
Yes, the Iranians have a backwards air force, no doubt about it. They're archaic, they're ancient, their armed forces are also archaic and ancient as well, and that's probably why Iran would not stand up well to a conventional ground war, although their geography will help out massively in slowing down a U.S. advance, because we most likely have to land somewhere in the Persian Gulf or the Gulf of Oman, and then start pushing in from there, and we'd have to deal with all the mountain ranges in between that area and the actual populated area of the coast of the Caspian Sea. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for throwing that in. That is quite true. They are very archaic as far as their armed forces go. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Blue Flam 777 LSA once again. And he puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Blue Flam, for that support. And he puts in some words of encouragement and says, keep doing what you do, and questions in chat.
Man, you just really summarized that thing down well, didn't you? Because I'm sitting here looking at it, I'm like, man. Let's see. And thank you so much once again, Blue Flam. Matthew seems to not want to read the whole thing off, probably for good reason. But still, thank you once again, and thank you for saying to keep doing what we do. We try our best, and of course, support from folks like you, Blue Flam, help us to make this thing possible, and help us to be able to do this day in and day out so we can do what we do. And so thank you so much once again for supporting that, and we will make sure to get a question from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Leonce Pierre, who says, have you guys seen the report of a missile strike in the town of Taba in Egypt?
I did hear about that, but I wasn't able to really get enough news to be able to report on that before we went on air. But I did hear about it. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Of course, unfortunate to see because it seems as though it hit possibly a civilian area. I think it was a civilian area, but with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Guamzon Cruz, who puts in a 5 and says, all salute the 50-state war tribe, LMAO.
And thank you so much for the support. And I'm guessing that you must love the little intro that we have for the U.S. in the Middle East. I think it's a great intro, absolutely high-stepping. We love that kind of stuff for Ukraine, the United States, really everyone. And I thank you so much for enjoying that and also enjoying the U.S. of A pretty nice country, much like every other in the Western world. And so on that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And the next one goes to Dirty Dog, who puts in a 5 and says, one of my favorite sayings and one I live by Speck. By Speak Softly and Carry a Big Stick, Teddy effin
Roosevelt.
It says Chatterville. Let's go. And hello, enforcers.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. And Teddy Roosevelt is my favorite president. So I know that one well. And I also know the one, my favorite quote from him is, complaining without offering a solution is only whining. And that's one thing I always live up to, is that if I complain about something, there's got to be a solution to what I'm complaining about. There's got to be some kind of a fix at the end of it, rather than just whining to whine. And that's one big thing that we always talk about on this channel. And that's also, really quickly, just make a very quick critique, because I know we're trying to cut down on time, but that's one thing that just really annoys me about the modern... of course, no politics. We always make sure to strike at everyone fairly on both sides at the same time, and that's what we're doing right now. So that falls within the no politics rule, where we're not picking a side, we're just assessing the whole thing. Both sides in the United States nowadays just complain. Well, not complain, they whine, and they never provide solutions to the things they whine about, either side. And that just annoys me greatly, because it's like, why are you saying anything about it if you don't even have a solution to the issue? That just annoys me to no end. Come up with something to fix the problem instead of just saying something about it. Otherwise, you're just complaining to complain. Well, more so whining to whine. But I do thank you so much for the support. And also, I love that quote as well from Teddy Roosevelt. A really good one. And Teddy Roosevelt really was into speaking softly and carrying a big old shtick. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mark Gagne, who puts in a 5 and says, has there ever been a war after World War II that has been conducted using rules of war?
The Korean War mostly tried to follow the rules of war, but, the Gulf War also followed the rules of war as well. So there have been 2, at least, that the United States was involved in, and I believe there have been some others, but not that many. Most of the time, it just kind of devolves into absolute chaos and debauchery, but at least people try to follow the rules of war a little bit, although it really doesn't last long most of the time. So the 21st century is a little bit of an exception. But with that, it's not really an exception. It's kind of the norm like every other one. But with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for support.
And the next one goes to Barry Woodward, who puts in a 777. And very nice. They said, what makes this stream awesome is the interactive chat between the LSA and the enforcers. Moderate your efforts. Stay strong. LSA behind you. Don't go public.
And we will never go
Don't
public.
go public, man. We're going to IPO tomorrow. I'm telling you.
We're about to go on the New York Stock Exchange tomorrow. But still, thank you so much for the support. Help the channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for enjoying the interactive chat side of things. We wish that we could talk to everyone. But, to put this out there, because we always have one person, and it always happens like weekly, who sits there and goes, they're not answering my question. It's pissing me off. There are 20,000 messages that come in a night over 2 hours. There's 10,000 messages an hour. We can't answer all of them. And that's one thing that I absolutely hate, though, is that we can't answer all of them. But at the same time, it's just a fact of life. We can't answer all of them. It always irks me when people don't get that. It's just like, we can't
make special exceptions for everyone. Otherwise, we'll never end the stream. It'll just be a never-ending live stream, and we will drop dead. But I do thank you so much for enjoying the interactive live chat, for as interactive as we can make it with how many people are here. Because because it's just great to know, and also the LSA talks to each other inside the live chat, and that's the best place for the community to be. And so with that, thank you so much once again for giving us some words of encouragement, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Keymaster, Gavin House, and Cersify, who each put in a $5 donation and said, "Great content, lads." And we do appreciate it very much, and the kind words as well. And I'm glad to hear you love the content. Because we put our blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I do appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you all for the support as well. We not only did we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this, we put our sanity into it, our physical well-being, everything. We just throw it to the wind, and we do this every single day. And so thank you all so much for enjoying it, because we really do our best. And so with that, thank you. Oh, well, that sounded really narcissistic. We try our best. Hopefully it's good. Maybe it's not. I don't know, because we're exhausted most of the time, so I can't even tell at this point. But with that, thank you once again to all of y'all for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dirty Dog yet again, who puts in a 5. It says, "Enforcers, take a break when needed. Don't be like us, the older generation, who burn out moving our families forward. Take at least a day, guys. At least a day."
No! Dude, you know, a company would probably love me to have this kind of work ethic working for them, because they'd be like, "Man, this guy has never taken a day off." They'd be like, "This is great." But honestly, it probably would be best for us to take a day off. Well, we actually did last weekend on Saturday. We kind of cut out a stream and rested then. But we can't make that a pattern, y'all, because we've got to keep covering the news. The news doesn't stop for us, and we can't stop for the news. And so with that, thank you for the support. Thank you for the kind words. But it's never going to happen. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rush Rizza, who puts in a 5 and says, "I'm telling you, I know I'm ugly. On Halloween, my parents sent me out as is. I'm telling you."
Oh, man, I'm telling you. When I open up the door, the kids give me candy. Oh, man, I'm telling you. And thank you so much for the support. And thank you for throwing in a Rodney. We don't really get to do voices much anymore, because people don't really ask for him much anymore. But I'm glad to know that people still love Rodney, because Rodney is real. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Guamson Cruz, who puts in a 2. Thank you very much for that support. Guamson says, "Honest opinion, how long do you think Iran gonna last? Iran."
I gotta tell you, Iran is not going to last that long. I gotta tell you, they might have the Persian rugs, they might have the Ayatollah, whoever that guy is, but we're gonna bomb the shit out of them.
But in all honesty, I would say they're probably not going to last that long, maybe a few months before the U.S. Forces their government into collapse. They economically collapse, or you end up collapsing their country through invasion. One or the other. But they wouldn't last that long, in my opinion, because it's a very feeble nation, very feeble government, and also it honestly has bad geography with the mountain ranges and everything for a modern nation. But with that, I hope that does address it well. Thank you so much once again for support.
Guamson Cruz, the best of Guam and cruising.
But with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a whopping $2 super chat from Duck Warrior 137. Big shout out to Duck Warrior. He's a great guy, the best I've seen. Thank you very much. Couldn't enlist due to asthma. I suck at breathing. They don't want you to hear this. I suck at breathing. Oh.
I gotta tell you, I would have joined the army in Vietnam, but I had bone spurs.
But anyways, thank you for the support, Dark Warrior 137, and helping the channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, it does suck. I actually had asthma for a short while in my life, but it went away. So kind of like the Teddy Roosevelt thing, I apparently just beat asthma. It just ended, and it never came back. I didn't like work out or anything; it just stopped. But still, I hate to hear that, because, you know, the scoliosis actually ruined my future. I'd actually gotten a merit scholarship, well, at least an offer for a merit scholarship to go to Virginia Military Institute from the representative of my district, because I was able to play bagpipes, and I played bagpipes at a Veterans Day function while they were there. And they're like, "Oh, that's really cool." And so then they emailed my JROTC senior Army instructor guy some stuff where they're like, he can get a merit scholarship to VMI and go there and then get commissioned as an officer practically immediately. And I was like, "Oh my God, that is so cool." And then literally a few months later, I found out I had scoliosis. And then I went to the recruiter. I was like, "Hey, could I even join with this? And they're like, no, not even with a waiver. And I was like, well, that just sucks. And so then I had to figure out something else to do rather than being an officer in the Army. And so then I decided I would go through college and get a history degree and then go into law school and then try and become an attorney. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I have a very similar story to yours. It sucks to have a crappy pretzel back. But still, thank you once again for support. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And for our last super chat, we have a $2 donation from God 420. Thank you very much. My shortwave was made in 1947.
And I gotta tell you, I thank you so much once again for the support. It's absolutely incredible to see that you're helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, 1947 is a great year, wonderful year. The wine didn't taste better. The manuals for the M1 Sniper didn't look that great. I mean, honestly, they were wonderful looking. Have you ever seen the print for them? They're beautiful, the greatest books, but they're not as good as my books. My books are the best. You can always buy mine at the bookstore. It's absolutely wonderful.
But still, thank you so much for the support. And very interesting to hear that your shortwave radio was made in 47. I like to hear that. Pretty cool. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the Morse code message and the live chat questions. Due to physical exhaustion, we will be covering the Morse code message, 3 live chats due to time constraints, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. However, we always want to make sure to let y'all know that we are dedicated to trying to get live chat questions. Of course, can't be a lot of them because, it takes a lot of time to answer the super chats, but we always want y'all to know the channel is entirely free to watch. You can throw in a question, and there is certainly a chance that it will be answered at the end of the stream. And so with that, we are on to the Morse code.
And believe it or not, we don't have the Morse code decoders tonight. They're missing MIA. They say MIA. We don't know where they are. They're missing. They're gone. So with that being said, we don't have the Morse, unfortunately. But we will move on to our first live chat question.
And it goes to SNR Dougherty, who says, I think y'all can cut the Russian decoy getting hit last night by a Ukrainian drone at 40 minutes and 59 seconds. Can you look and tell me what you think?
Thank you for sharing that. I would look at that on stream right now, but pulling up a second stream and trying to go through and get the timestamp for that, we will probably have to save that for off stream, but you are probably correct. It probably was a decoy, but I'll have to go back and look after the stream is over. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Del Elaticus, who says, it appears that Ukraine has crossed the Dnipro in multiple places in Kherson, and you think this might be the real winter offensive positions?
Yeah, I'm going to be quite honest. We saw this actually happen in midsummer, sometime around July and August, and it actually didn't produce a lot. We saw the Ukrainians take Kazachi Alahri, and then they never moved on from there. Also, although we thought that was the opening of a second front outside of the area of Rabotne, because that was moving somewhat slowly, and then it turned into nothing. So I don't really think this is going to be that big of a deal. And, I always make fun of OSINT people, or specifically war analysts, for always making everything out to not sound like a big deal. But in this particular instance, given the precedent of what happened in the midsummer, I believe this is probably not going to be that big of a deal. But I could always be wrong. There's always a chance I'm wrong, because I'm just kind of giving my take on the thing, and it's just an opinion like anyone else's. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Bossy Bill, who says, what will it take to put an end to Iran's terrorism? Strong military intervention, covert political action, covert economic action, or other?
All of the above. Why limit yourself to one when you can do them all? Why not screw over their economy, try and overthrow their government, and even conduct a little invasion against them? That's honestly the best way to do it. That's also what we did to Afghanistan. Outside of the economic part, we screwed them over governmentally, had people trying to overthrow the Taliban, and then we also went in and invaded them on top of that as well. A kind of a 2-in-1, a double whammy. And I think we could do a triple whammy on Iran. So why not all three? And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for being here tonight. At the peak, there was 7.2 thousand of y'all here, and since the stream has started, 31,140 of y'all have watched this stream before it ended. We've been entirely honored to be able to cover the news for each and every single one of y'all tonight. And if y'all have enjoyed massively, please make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and also make sure to hit the bell button as well, because these live streams come on 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East in picture and video evidence and by official reports as well, and you can always count on us to be here. We rarely ever miss days, and that probably will never happen well into the future. And so with that, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you all for another great stream. And of course, love Ukraine and God bless Israel. Good night, critters.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Ooh.